All right, thank you everybody calling to order tonight, promoting Sustainable Easton, our PACE meeting. As not here, but I think I can remember loosely what this is, a hybrid meeting. So we will ask Dottie if you could continue to just monitor for people's engagement online. That would be appreciated. And team attendance, either remote and or here live, as long as you're part of the roll call, means that it counts towards quorum. Thank you so much. How did I do? Not too bad. Perfect. So I'll just go around and do a roll call, and if you could just say your name and present, that would be great. Jocelyn, starting with you.
Jocelyn, present.
Chris Cohen, present.
Andrea Starjewski, present.
Kathy Millett, present.
Marissa Souza, present.
Nancy Donahue, present.
Tom Broussard, present.
Jen Starr, present.
James Hamilton, present. Connor Reed, present.
Wendy Nightingale, present.
Chris Mills, present.
Denise Higgins, present.
Alicia Cabral, present.
Dottie Fulgenetti, present.
Perfect. We know all the people listening to hear Chris. We get it. He's the draw, the attraction. Thank you, Joe. Are we good to go, Joe? Perfect. Awesome. So with that tonight, team, we have 7 items on our agenda. First one should be pretty quick, approval of minutes. Second one, brief discussion on the prior meeting that we had and just some of the school information that was shared to give context. Team Orange, so clearly we're reaching a critical point, so I thought I'd just share some thoughts about how we might proceed from here going forward. We will talk about a multi-year budget forecast, so Wendy and I will probably take the first stab at leading that. It will inform, most likely, where your individual opinions may be and begin to give you a tool for how you may think about what sustainable means, how long it means, and what we may truly accomplish with whatever decision our committee recommends. Then we have the really interesting part. I'm looking forward to everybody's individual homework, where we actually ask you to once again recommit to what you think the size of the challenges that face our community, and importantly, how you propose to solve it, and then some color upon the solution. We then have kind of really start to hit the ground about future meeting dates, deliverables, and the 226 open house. So a lot of people are already continuing to ask for, like, when's the next meeting? When can we get together? And Nancy's done a great job drumming up support, so credit for that. Did anybody have any questions on the minutes from October 9th, 23rd, 6th, and January 8th? Hearing none, I'd take a motion to accept.
A motion to approve the slate.
Excellent. Connor, seconded by Chris Mills. And going around the room in order, we'll start the opposite side. Dottie, to keep you on your toes.
Fulgenetti, yes.
Cabral, yes.
Higgins, yes.
Mills, yes.
Nightingale, yes.
Reed, yes. Hamilton, yes.
Broussard, yes.
Donahue, yes.
Souza, yes.
Millett, yes.
Starjewski, yes.
No. Yeah, but you can vote. But no,
Okay.
I think you're a no, because Jocelyn, myself, Nancy, and Jim are here. That's 4 residents at large, and you would have been the alternate.
So am I voting yes?
No.
No.
But we still appreciate your sentiment. Is that fair?
That's fine.
Awesome.
Loved him. Loved him.
Good call. And as always, participation is greatly appreciated. Awesome. All right. So discussion about last week. Understandably so, there has been feedback. One of the first notices I got was an email saying, it was great that we got the level of visibility that you provided. It's exactly what I had been looking for. Thank you for creating that opportunity. Next feedback I got was, I can't believe that you showed that, and specifically can't believe that you showed names, because you've been saying no names. So I think it's important to clarify a couple of things. The information that we showed, and I'll call up my website if we can get it to work, is available every March to May in the Enterprise, the newspaper. Is there anybody that didn't know that? Like, literally they publish the exact list I gave. I just happened, because it was a school presentation, to give only school professionals. But does anybody not know? Like, do I have to call up the website to show you, or do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Please don't make me call up the website.
Okay.
This whole thing
So
would crash.
the format is identical. And so I'm happy to provide it for the town. We can do that. But last week was an attempt to provide an answer because I have heard it from people on this committee, confidentially. I have heard it from residents that we don't have visibility into the single line item that the school presents. Fair. What I could not allow, and the reason why I'm erring on the side of transparency on actual numbers, is we get to town meeting and somebody stands up after we've done all our work and says, but you've never shared the information and visibility into the single largest expense that your town has, and I still have no idea what's in that single line item. Regardless of Leisha's presentation, the school committee's presentation, the budget discussions that have been had, all the reasons where there are opportunities to have dialogue. But as the person who will most likely be up there with some other individuals, for somebody to stand up and say, but I still don't know who you pay, that would be a horrific reason for whatever we recommend to fail and impact the lives of potentially 40 to 60 people. And where I'm going with it is, in terms of sharing actual information, I have no dog in the race except to be successful for whatever we recommend in May of 2025. Whether or not there are personal discussions, personal items, or people think it was about personal, no. Because I'm worried about 40 to 60, maybe more people, the deterioration of programs and services that will come with that at May of town meeting. So the more things, and I just don't know if everybody realizes that the amount of investment of time, I think maybe Connor can probably nod his head in agreement, that we spend to ensure that as we're making a logical argument at town meeting, somebody doesn't stand up and say, but I think you're wrong because I always grew up with blah, blah, blah and drank from garden hoses, and that's why you don't need this, and we shouldn't do it, and it's crazy. When I'm thinking on our behalf about what's the right thing to do, which if we all collectively agree that's to try to put forth an operational override, that's what I want to get up there and advocate and win with every fiber of my being. And if it's to reduce expenses, I want to educate the town that that's what our recommendation is and why, and how painful that will be, and why you should trust what you're about to hear for a budget from Leisha and Connor, that they're trying to do the best on that particular answer. And get ready, it's going to be painful. So I just want everybody to know the difference of what I said, bringing it full circle, where you said no names. Every time, and it may not have been clear about no names, was on the expense side of reductions. And there's two very explicit reasons, sure you might know, if you've ever been in a situation like I have. One of the reasons is if this committee starts recommending names that are out of norms or inappropriate, and that happens to be a person who's reduced and it wasn't correct, then we could be liable for the town for inappropriate termination, and therefore subject to a lawsuit. And in Massachusetts, one of the great states, that there are a number of damages that are assessed when you have an incident like that. And I can tell you at certain levels, I would always recommend that if there's an option and everything, something you felt was untoward and you deserve to not have been terminated, you should go and explore that, because the ramifications to you could be large. For a group like this to recommend at the individual name level, that gets scary. Like, it could be putting people in legal consequence. There's a second reason. This committee has no purview over picking a position or a name. Zero, right? By law, that is Connor and Leisha, like, they will decide in a reduction scenario where that comes. So I'm using that to give you guidance that when we get to a recommendation phase, there will be a balance between, like, you can't go and say, hey, it should be Tom. You could be opening up our town to liability lawsuit because we are not necessarily appropriate to be defining that. And even if we tell Connor, here's the 23 names, he's absolutely not going to take the 23 names we give him. He can't. I'm right? Like, is that
if it coincidentally overlapped, that'd be one thing. But yeah, it's not. If PASE is going to look at the situation and say, we think X dollars should be cut from the town or the schools, that's one thing. But to say, well, Connor, I don't think you're doing a great job, so your job should get cut. Or, if Tom was working here, that's not a budget decision when you're targeting a specific person for a budget cut, right?
Yeah. So does that make sense, the difference between, like, I absolutely don't want you all to think that there's talking out of both sides of the mouth. One is, for once and for all, I asked at the last meeting, and now you'll know why I asked specifically and asked everybody to nod or say yes. Do you think there's no more transparency? Like, do you need more?
I think I need just a little bit more.
Okay.
In that, I think bringing up the salaries was maybe people have thought was transparent, and I can understand that. I think my frustration came from the conversation we had 5 minutes before that went on the screen. And for me, like, being told that the salary was going to be up, I really didn't even blink an eye at it. It was then your analogy after it that left me uncomfortable after
Okay.
you did it. Because your analogy was, in the private sector, if you had a restaurant and you had chefs and then you had a restaurant manager, and your chefs might be really good, but they've kind of maxed out what they're able to give you. And if they're getting paid more than the restaurant manager, you have to get rid of the chef.
Okay.
And then you go on screen and point out my name specifically. So I think at worst, like at best, maybe inappropriate. At worst, it was like intimidating.
Got it.
And I felt that that was completely inappropriate.
Okay.
To have that conversation ahead of that, and then to point my name out and not have said that in front of everybody.
Got it. So glad you brought it up. Hope you feel comfortable in the future that I really wish you had called me before, because
I don't want to have a one-on-one conversation. I want it to, if you're going to have a conversation like that with me and to put that out there, say it in front of everybody.
So
I don't want to have a one-on-one.
I'm going to. What I meant was, if anybody in this committee is uncomfortable, feel free to give a call. Because what I would prefer, hopefully, is that over this time you've learned I am here for our team. So there may have been a different intent of what I said, which there was. Whether or not you believe me, again, that gets back to trust and transparency, and I can't fix that. But you've dealt with me for X number of meetings. The reason why I brought it up is that it's important for us to ensure our residents, who are largely private-based, appreciate the juxtaposition of how we have our salaries and they're contractually obligated, and there are impacts and there are steps, and that there is a matrix that we talked about in part of that conversation that the resident doesn't understand. And yet the resident on their side may say, I don't get it. In the private sector, I just solve it by making sure I'm right size, right salary, and adjusting. And we have a responsibility to educate our residents that that is not how it works in our world, that there are union contracts, that there are requirements for last one out, potentially first, last one in, first one out. Like, there's a tenure-based system is a better way to say it, that there are a lot of complexities to our particular salaried position and human asset category that the general resident never deals with. So
But then in that case, then don't show the end result, show the contracts. You can show the contracts, you can show the matrix, and you can show how to access that. I'm just saying, like, what you might not be aware of, that like a few meetings back, we were talking about what other districts had done for cuts. And did you hear the positions that they were bringing up of what other districts had done and suggested? And for me, I was paying attention to that. And then to have this come right on the cuffs of that,
okay,
it felt targeted.
okay,
And to be honest with you, after a conversation like that, like, I'm not like gonna call you up.
Sure.
I'd rather have this conversation and like
fair.
let you know how
We
I'm
can do
feeling.
that. All I can also say, Kathy, because I can sense that you're uneasy, by the end of today, and everybody's going to know where I stand, if you don't think I'm for preserving people's positions in our town, then you didn't go back and look what I was promoting for the budget subcommittee in 2020, and you probably don't necessarily would believe me now, because my position hasn't changed. I've done the best I can to be objective, as if I never had these discussions for the last 5 years, but I have. So if you thought I was targeted, just know it goes against every other public stance I've ever given, and every ounce of minute and time I've given to this committee for us to make sure we're going to the residents of our community with a very aggressive ask when you see this tonight. right? Like there will be people that probably will be negatively impacted by our community if we decide to go an override route that may not be able to most likely afford this recommendation. So I'm all in, and that's why I feel even worse that you may have felt targeted, because if anybody wants to go back on a public record, you could have found mine out just by Googling all that stuff and where I stood for the last 5 years. So I'm not targeting anybody. I'm actually the one who's here to make sure everybody in our community knows that if you do not want to go an override route, which is their vote, I learned a long time ago, residents are going to vote in May. I'm going to say thank you for coming and appreciate that you exercised your duty. I hope I do a good job and we're not saying goodbye to somewhere between 40 and 80 people, because we're doing way more with less. We have less staff, we have less expense, less overhead. It's all people. We do more with less. I believe that. So you guys are hearing my story, but that's fine because it's better to come out now. So I can't undo what I did, but I can tell you, if you thought there was a target about looking at reductions, for 5 years I've been saying I think our town does too much with too little, and I'm concerned that at some point we're going to break down and the wheels will come off. That some very key people will leave, and that they have been overcompensating for a number of individuals that normally towns would need to get stuff done, and I'm concerned when that comes to pass. So I'll reiterate my argument when we kick off the sides of the problem and how I would expect to solve it. I've probably buried the lead as aggressively as I could, right? So, but I just want to say that I apologize that you may have felt targeted, and I regret that I wasn't in that brief moment able to articulate that the comparison is really making sure that when we speak to our residents, they don't think it's my private industry experience. Because it's not. You can't just do what would normally happen in private industry. And I wasn't clear on that, and therefore you felt targeted. And I just want to make sure everybody here, if it's not me, go to Nancy. Because that was the next item I was going to bring up, was that comment. So people that you folks got not the benefit of, but I was trying to impart a benefit of, and not everybody else did. But that's one of the things, if we go the route of an override, why will residents not understand what we're trying to say? And our people are very different than the private population. Jim?
Yeah, I would say.
Actually, I'm so sorry. I just want to afford Kathy, because this is a personal component. I want to make sure that if you have anything else that you wanted to voice, that this was the right forum, because there is nothing you can't say that hasn't been typed on a website about me, that hasn't been said in front of my house or said in front of public throughout my career here in town.
I'm the type of person that I'm not going to say something.
You can do whatever
to
you want.
To the side, I'm not going to say it to your face, and that's why I brought it up now.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, is there anything else? Like, and anybody, like, I can only tell you that everything that's probably possibly been said to me or done to me in this town happened when I was running for the select board. So there's nothing. You can open book. My intent has never been to ever target somebody. I hope to God you at the end of the day say, I'm really glad we had a champion that put all that time in, and Nancy as well. Do you want me to go to Jim?
Yep.
Cool. Thank you, by the way.
About last meeting, I did show up 30 minutes late to the start, so maybe I missed some context, but according to the agendas that I saw on the emails, there was nothing about us talking about the schools last week at all.
Okay.
So as a citizen, I, felt very unprepared to talk about that in any depth, and even try to respond to anything I saw on the screen, which I think is inappropriate, that was a topic of conversation without any preparation for people who haven't been doing this for 5 years. 2, it was mortifying to see people's names and salaries on a screen. I know that's available to the public, but they can go search it or give them a link to go search it on their own.
Sure.
Basically, it did exactly what I thought this committee was not supposed to do, which is put someone's name and their quote-unquote cost to the town on a screen to look at and dissect.
Okay.
So to be broadsided unexpectedly with a whole topic of conversation that we had to react in real time to something that was clearly prepared, and I would even say rehearsed, is unfortunate and annoying.
Okay.
And it's just the fact that it feels like I wasn't supposed to be prepared. Like there's clearly asymmetrical information here, which is natural. There are people who have been doing this for their career for many years, and then there are people that, for whatever reason, I'll admit, were chosen for this committee that don't have that level of experience and insight, that are trying to catch up. And I just don't understand. I still, 2 weeks later, don't understand the context or like the reason we were showing people's names and salaries on the screen, because it literally just looked like, here's people who are on this committee specifically. Here's how much they cost our town, and they are school teachers or classroom teachers, however you want to classify them. And I don't really know what I was supposed to do with that information, but as someone, I would just say there's a cost, and I thought we weren't supposed to talk about this.
You good? In terms of any other points, because then I can just address them all. So first of all, the fact that most of that, almost all of that information, except the last 2 slides, was already discussed in prior meetings, that's on you, I believe, to ensure that you consumed it when it was presented and that you digested it. And if you still weren't up to speed on it, raise your hand and ask the question. So that's the first part of that presentation.
But it wasn't on the agenda.
We'll get to, so because it had already been pre-presented and you weren't there at the first 30 minutes, but the goal was as an outcome of internal discussions that we receive of transparency, visibility. I still don't feel like I can answer the school question. And you all are supposed to be in our community championing the information that Dr. Cabral shared with us. I received the chart. So when somebody says, why are we so top heavy? Your response should have been, hopefully, we actually looked at staffing from our surrounding DART districts in all of our neighboring communities. The average number of headcount for the administrative position is 9. We happen to run 9. So I don't think we're top heavy by that metric. So please, resident in our community, help me understand by what you mean by top heavy, because we want to be informed and answer that. That was a key slide that we shared last week that had already been shared. The other slide was how many people do we have in each of our schools leading the schools? So when somebody says, why do we have so many assistant principals? Why is there a second one at the Easton Middle School? You now have information, and although I didn't point out Easton Middle School at the last one, that was clearly a question that we were asked at a certain point, and I focused on 6 to 8 for a reason in last week's meeting, to say you've already received this information. You have the answer. So if you're coming to me saying, I don't know how to answer these questions, then I have to ask, I need you to engage better, because Dr. Cabral gave us all that information previously.
That's not what I said.
So,
I said it wasn't on the agenda.
no, I understand. But I'm saying that most of that information, when you said I wasn't prepared, most of that information was already out in the public domain. So I'm distinguishing between, you're correct, it probably could have been clarified that we would be presenting pre-existing information at that meeting. However, your next statement of I felt blindsided, that I wasn't given it to prepare, that information was in your hands over months ago.
Right, but I'm saying I could have, in my busy schedule and personal life,
Sure.
I could have taken some time before the meeting to look at the stuff we've already presented.
Sure.
I don't have it all off the top of my head of all the DART information and things
I'm
like
with you.
that.
That's why I
wasn't asking for
presented
the
it.
slides ahead of time. I was asking for, are we going to talk about the schools for
So, Jim,
2 to
let's look
3
at
hours
this just
of
from a different
5-hour session?
viewpoint. The intent that I spent the 3 hours the night before was to help this committee have a go-to-market deck regarding school information that would once and for all address every single question somebody could possibly have about 65% of our spend in our community. So that all you had to do was print it off and take it. The comment that Nancy made, I wonder how many hours you spent on this yesterday. Sorry.
It's okay.
So I appreciate the frustration and recognize that I could have done a better job at communication. The whole goal of this is for 19 people, not all 19 are here, to be informed, going to all of our residents every day to say, here is the reality. Because at some point tonight, we're going to be going to them and saying, we'd like to increase your taxes, potentially, if we go the override route. Don't want anybody to think that we're going to do that yet, by $500 to $1,000. So when I ask all of the people in our community to pay $500 to $1,000, and they have a right to every piece of information that we could possibly have including people's salaries, then I'm going to give that now and not later. So that when all the questions are being asked, why are we so top heavy? I don't know, look, but here's all the people. And by the way, on May of 2024, I think it was May, the enterprise published the exact same list, all the detail, in a newspaper. So none of that, if you hire somebody in the public arena, I'm sure you tell them everything is public. Pretend your neighbor's going to know your salary. The town side breaks out because we have DESE, school, different reporting. The town side for years has printed off, here's Connor's salary, here's Dave Field's salary. I guess the name isn't there because the departments have 1 to 2 or 3 people.
The names
I'm
are
sorry,
there.
the names
Just,
are there.
And just to be clear, and this isn't like a comparison, and that is feedback that I think many of us heard at the open house. Is why does the budget book present the town down to the employee name, salary, and the schools doesn't show that way? So I think that's responsive to that feedback. But yes, Tom is correct that we have for years published in the budget book, and you could pull it up now, every single town employee's name, title, and earnings are in it.
And the school hasn't for years. So I heard some response of where I got it. I did got it from the schools. Not because there was a conspiracy, but because I literally wrote, I can either go download it from the enterprise. The format, the grid is identical. Or you can give it to me. I already have it for the towns because we've published it for 5 years. But people are saying, because we're not giving it to them, we're not being transparent. Sorry, I'm going to do the same thing I did with Kathy. I will work, as always, to get better on communication, because to lose the essence of a message because a presentation was poor, or I didn't communicate clearly, I didn't give enough notice, that's a travesty. Because the purity of the message was, now whoever wants transparency on the school side for 65% of your expense, I asked you all, did you need more information? And if you don't, great. We did our job, go take it, and if, tell me what you think of it. None of that was relatively, hopefully I'll just leave it at that. I do want to afford you of, if your feedback is, we need to make sure that we're on point about our agenda items, that's great feedback, thank you, because this is never about that. If your feedback is, you blindsided me, hopefully what I just shared with you is that since I thought most of it we had already digested, that was clearly not my goal. I just put it in one neat place for you to have like a convenient deck. I hope that intent shows through. Regarding your time, all I'll say is I will thank everybody for their time. But I'm going to ask for more. My job is to get to May of 2025 and win and succeed. So if that means we have to go stand on a sidewalk and hold signs, I'll ask you to do it. I have door knocked for every single weekend for twice a week for 8 weeks and invested 80 hours to get elected to the select board because I felt it was important for our community. And I give credit to anybody that's done that and puts themselves out there. So I know how much I can ask. I know how much I can give. You all can say no, that's okay. But my job is not to make it easy for you and say, just make it easy. No. My job is to ask for more and more and more because come May of 2025, one way or another, hundreds of people's lives are going to be impacted, either by elimination and reductions or because they're going to feel like they can't afford to live in our incredible town. If there are other things that I missed that you want me to be thoughtful about, please send a note or something. I'm fine. And again, we can play this game of I want to make sure it's in front of everybody in public. That's fine. I'm okay with that. It's
don't think that's
not
a
a game. Not a game.
I don't
we
think
can,
that's a game.
We
I
can
think
play
that's
this
transparency
that
and to be
it's
clear.
public. Sorry, I used the wrong word. We can play the I'll only talk to you in public about certain things. That's okay. But the goal is to use the time in between meetings to say, look, I'll add that as an agenda item. There was a question about how we build our agenda. Thank you. We'll put the agenda on, we'll talk about it, we'll bring everybody in the same page, and everybody gets the benefit, to your point, of being prepared for the agenda item. I mean, this was, in essence, I made this forum. And we have had agenda items that weren't listed. So if somebody's out there and wanted to talk about the fact that an agenda item wasn't on it, we didn't get a chance to put that on here. So I guess we're somewhat, again, outside the purview of a specific line item. But I'm okay with that. I'm human. Not everything will come out perfect. 15% of the time, somebody's going to hate me. I get it. I'm trying not for that. So I apologize.
What was the
I really do.
expectation of what the agenda line item would have said, though? Because it kind of gets encompassed in discussions about the school budget, right? Like, I just want to set the expectation for everybody on how specific an agenda would be. It wouldn't be that specific that we're going to have a slide that talks about this, this, or this. It's encompassed in what was on there.
Yeah.
So if somebody has an expectation of something they want to see differently, just be clear about what you're. I don't know what you're at. What's being asked.
The agenda didn't even say schools.
It didn't say anything about the school budget at all.
Well, wasn't it a follow-up on the open house?
Correct.
It just says debrief of 1-8 open house.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I feel like at a certain point we're starting to split hairs, and this just gets to, are we going to trust and work together or not? The committee's charge is super explicit, and it's about the town and school operations, right? I mean, so if the feedback to Tom is it should be more specific on the agenda, I think Tom's saying that's fine. You know, feedback received, criticism received, that's legit. But to suggest that it's somehow surprising that we're talking about the school budget or the town budget or salary, I mean, like we have fiscal 26 preliminary budget on here. If somebody brought up the school budget or the town budget or salary, none of us, I guess it's just every single meeting of PACE is going to be talking about the town and schools, and has, right?
Yep.
Sorry, Denise. Thank you for being patient.
I just wanted to say that I had a different take on the meeting, and I didn't feel, maybe I missed and I wasn't clear, but I didn't feel that your intention was to target anyone. And I'd like to thank you because I communicated with you that I had received multiple messages as a PACE member from the outside community asking for transparency. And I think that you may have responded in that way. And I can tell you that the people that are watching this and had watched it sent me back messages to say thank you for that. So I had just kind of a different take on it.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Cabral?
So I was actually going to ask you something similar. I did not realize that those slides were going to come up that evening. It's not your responsibility to tell us that they are, meaning me, the school department, that you're showing school slides. I did get an email from you the evening before asking for the salaries, and you said it exactly like you just said it. I can get it from these sites, or you can give it to me if it's easy. And it is easy, so I just gave it to you.
Sure.
I didn't ask what it was going to be used for, and I presumed, and maybe I shouldn't have, but am I hearing you say, because this was my presumption and I might be wrong, that you received multiple requests for more information about schools?
Yes.
Because that wasn't part of the email, which is fine, because we want to provide information. I just presumed someone asked you for salaries, and so I gave it to you.
Sure.
But what I'm hearing is that you brought it up and you re-showed those slides because you received multiple questions. Is that, did I
So-
take a leap with that? That's why I thought
There
that you
were
did that. And honestly, I thought people probably asked about my salary because you said my name too, so I just presumed. But I guess I shouldn't have presumed. Can you tell me if that's what happened? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't need to know who
absolutely.
asked questions or what they want to
There are
know.
I'm happy to share that. At the Queesit House, there were questions that surfaced after that. Denise just spoke about them, where residents reached out and said, I still feel like it's a single line item for the schools. Knowing that we had spent an entire session on information for the schools, I literally repackaged the information you provided. So the first 5 slides roughly were about the information we had already reviewed. Because I also was receiving internally from our committee that I still don't feel like I have an understanding of where we spend our money on the schools. And that's why the progression of the information that was already provided, I went through logically. Meaning, if I have $1 to spend and I know 85 cents goes to salaries, And we started with the next ones, which were sped, books, there were R&M, transportation, right? So if everybody's clear on those, or if you need the contracts on those, we'll get them, so that when somebody asks you, you know, look for that extra, the next 15%, I can tell you exactly what that goes to. Special education, here's how that works. Transportation, contractual, R&M, books, everything else is 1 point. So now it's about salaries. And we
Just
heard,
reiterate that what I heard was no one asked me a specific salary. They were just asking for the information to be broken out
Getting
in a
there.
different manner.
Getting
So I
there.
just want to make sure that
so
people
other
know that.
feedback I got was, from a few people, why does the town show all of their detail? Again, it's this transparency. Why do I see all of the salary information on the town side? So agreed, I will fall on the communication sword. Because my response to them was, actually, like, it's published every year in the enterprise, and you can go to OpenGov Salary, so there's another one, .com, which I gave the links to everybody here. You can type in anybody's name and get it. If I wanted to, I could go back and type in everybody's name and figure out what everybody got for raises each year, for whatever reason, steps, tenure, got a degree, all that. Like, I'm slightly, so sorry, to answer your question, that's what drove why I put together all of the previously distributed information in one place, added in the salary split, because the salary split demonstrated the buckets of teachers, cleaners, substitutes. I got one missing there. But like, so when people say, why do we spend so much on the top? I don't know. Like, we invest 80 cents of our dollars. That's why I did that cascade here. So if residents are asking it and they're like, why do I know Connor's salary and nobody else's? Like, it's not secret. I think we do the school budget because what I heard was that's how DESE wants it. So
That's what I was just going to say.
So-
Just in case the public had that question again, we report it the way that the Department of Education asked us to, and we've never been asked for that, and we know it's public. However, it's definitely not a secret, and the town has never asked us for it in that way. As you saw, there were over 800 lines
yeah,
of people paid. I figured it was for economy of space, but we can post it on our own website we can post it wherever people want it. It's
Sure.
absolutely not in an effort to not be transparent.
and I agree. And that's why, candidly, I made a leap, and I apologize for it. I made a leap of, because it's already out there, why are we dealing with this specter and demon of they don't tell us? Like, oh my God, it's in a newspaper. I can't get my head around. People don't want to see names of public salaries, and I appreciate other people have different reactions about it. But I guess have known that if you're a public employee, you should just expect that everybody's going to know what your salary is, because it's published in the newspaper once a year. They literally publish who has the most overtime, who has the most other salary, who gets a base salary. Like, mine was just really more top level, just to illustrate the point. Like, all right, if you want a quick stat to tell people where we spend our money, we put 80 cents to making sure we teach kids, that we educate them, that we clean our buildings, and again, I'm missing one. Like, substitutes, paraprofessionals. Like, so I would, at some point, I'm so glad I put this on the agenda so that we can get this out there, because to me, there are a lot of questions that aren't being asked. Like, the questions I would ask are the ones from a resident perspective of, all right, so you told me that I don't get as many staff people as other towns, right? Like, we run lean. We've proved that. We know. But I can easily go to LinkedIn and Indeed and look up the average salary that teachers get in different school districts. So just so that you guys know, I did that in case somebody stepped up and said, well, but that's not the rest of the equation. Like, we have less people, but we pay them 5 times as much. No, we don't. We don't. Paraprofessional average pay is $21.67 across the state. High is $26.76 in Boston. So if anybody wants to talk paraprofessionals, I'd love to know what their average wage is, and then we can figure out what makes sense. And by the way, we staff 0.45 paraprofessionals for every single teacher we have. Don't know if that's good or bad, but if the average state is 0.8, then boy, we're not only underinvesting potentially on wage, we're underinvesting on potentially the number of bodies we have. Making this all up, so everybody don't take that for fact. But we don't ask the full scope of question with frequency when we have normal engagement with residents. I know to ask those questions. I know that answer because I care, because my daughter was the benefit of some incredible paraprofessional engagement. So I kind of want to know, like, holy, what if 0.4 is way under what we should have? I don't know what the right answer is. I trust Dr. Cabral, but I'm going to ask the question. Like, maybe when we go to ask for support from our residents, we need to build in a little more so we have the right staffing ratio so people get the benefit. Because that's how finite I want to be when we ask them for 5 million or 6 million or 9 million or whatever it is we end up asking them for, so that I can look everybody in the eye and say, yeah, I know that's going to hurt some people pretty legitimately, but I believe the greater good for our community is served by doing this. I believe the greater investment and return for the majority is this, and I think it's better that we keep 40 to 80 people that are kicking butt for our community. So yeah, ask me anything. Do you want to talk about average salaries? Do you want to talk about how we staff? Do you want to talk about who got paid what? It's all open. It is all open. And by the way, you on average pay $8,634 per year. You have a right to know. Ask away. So I know I'm getting a little animated. I'll step down, sorry.
I feel like at the beginning when we first talked about this, and even when we were doing the appointments of residents, and the select board worked really hard to be sure that we had people from different perspectives, people from different, support levels. We talked about that some of these meetings were going to be uncomfortable, and so I think it's a very robust and good, conversation. But I'm really surprised at the conversation, because I feel like we're going to be talking about all kinds of things. And is there anything else that people would feel uncomfortable to talk about? Should we put it out there now?
To be clear, I'm not uncomfortable with putting my salary up. Like, I worked hard. I've got I've got masters, I got a CAGS, I've been for 17 years. And you can see why I get paid. You can look at the contract, everything's right there. I have no problem with that. My problem was only with the comments beforehand and having it feel like, look, you're a chef.
Yep, targeting. I appreciate that, and I apologize.
And so, that was my problem with it, because I didn't, I just want to put it right there on the table and be like, I don't know, is that just coming, from you? Was it a misspoke? Or are you trying to tell me don't say anything?
God, no.
That's
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's valid. It's
to
valid.
be,
I get it.
completely transparent.
It's valid.
I'm just going to tell you what I felt and what I thought. So that was you can talk about my salary, you can talk about anybody's salary, but it was when we think about perspective, your perspective, and I can value that as a taxpayer and wanting to know that too. I get that. But I'm just saying from my perspective, which is very different because of the conversation that I had ahead of time. And then to not just have my name and salary up there, but to be called out by name publicly, for me, after that conversations and other, that didn't sit well with me, which is why I brought it up.
Good feedback. And I apologize for that, because it detracted from the goal, and I deeply regret that. And not only that, on a personal level, it impacted our relationship. And I mean that sincerely. I'm appreciative of everybody's effort that we've put forth.
With regards to salary, I mean, there's a bunch of us that are town employees here, and we joke about how it's published. I don't know anybody who gets the Enterprise anymore. I didn't even know they still printed it. I know it's an online thing. But so I think there's an upsetness about, you kind of have to do a dive now to do, you need to go looking for salary, which is why that may be some uncomfortableness. But with regards to further discussion of it, the one comment I did get, and it's very valid, and you did, to your defense, made a quick blurb about it, but it needs to be emphasized. When you're looking at those numbers reflect overtime, various stipends, coaching, because you see that on your matrix, and the next day people are talking about it. Somebody makes $178,000 a year. Well, they don't know that person spent half a year away from their family working overtime, snowstorms, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly important as far as transparency goes, because that directly, without conveying that information to the public, that directly makes people think that a lot of town employees are overpaid. And that is my phone blew up with regards to that. And that was just on the teacher side. If you went on the public side, my God. So it's totally appropriate to be talking about it, but we need to do a better job with respect to salary. Folks, just so you know, this is not their negotiated thing. This reflects blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
I think that's really important. And I
That's
just
fair.
brought it up because we're in this rabbit hole right now.
And I don't know when it happened, but I also do wonder when the first time we published the town side info, like, was there probably that shock as well? Like, wow, I never really saw it. Like, to your point, I agree. The enterprise is not widely read. It's not delivered. It's all electronic now. So you're right. I don't think that lessens the fact that we know it's all public. But like, your info and your name has been in our book for years.
Yeah.
So it really was getting the equitable access to information from the school side. And I appreciate, again, communication-wise, I could have done better. But it really did help us get to an equitable understanding of information that we've known what, is okay if I use you, but we know what Chris has gotten for 5 years. Like, those books, probably longer. The book's been out there. So, fair. I probably should have done a better job. And obviously, in hindsight, no, I could have. About, here's the why, here's what we're going to do, and here's the information we're going to share. Are there considerations we want to emphasize? To your point, like, this includes everything. And deficiently, it also includes the fact that you hired Tom only 3/4 of the way through the year, and so it's not even his full salary. So it's an imperfect attempt, given the time and the effort and the level of juice worth squeeze, to say, look, now in our community, people can't say, why do I know everything on the town side about everybody for years, and I still don't know on the school side? And you're right, I over-indexed. My answer was, that's a really easy answer. Like, oh my God, like, you can go get it. Like, there's these websites, there's, like, it's published. So appreciate the feedback, though, because again, it just helps us get better so that the message is heard and not discounted because of how it was presented.
And I just want to piggyback off of Chris's comments too, because I'm pulling up the Town of Easton's payroll, and it is broken down by salary, by longevity, by miscellaneous, and that is not what's presented for teachers. So everything that Chris mentioned, you have a lump sum at the end that's posted, and again, to Kathy's point, I have no problem with people knowing what I make. It's their right to know. They're paying my salary. That is completely appropriate. But there's so much missing in that, as Chris already mentioned.
Like the school vacation you gave up to mentor kids that you got paid extra for, and things like that.
The clubs that I get a stipend for, but I don't get paid for. The fact that I've been advising for clubs and doing things like that, that I had to go get my master's, that I'm still doing professional development that I pay for out of my own salary. So there's so many things that are missing in that. And then I do feel that the information that was presented for us was to intentionally be good, ultimately. I think it was for transparency. My biggest concern, and hopefully this can get us back to where we're on our agenda, was we have the teacher average salary of being $90,000 paired next to the per capita income of a single resident, which is $56,000. And then you see the lump sum of all of these people, or teachers, being paid, and then they're asking for more money. And so public perception matters a lot here, and I might just be super self-conscious because I'm one of those people that's on that list.
Mm-hmm.
I could very easily understand and see why they'd be like, well, they're already making a lot, and they don't work over the summer.
Agreed.
So, like, no, to all of this, absolutely.
Yeah. No, so just to that point, you're absolutely right, which is why we don't want that to come up at town meeting when nobody's shared information. I'll take full ownership for, we can share it better. We can even go back and do more. Like, that's more transparency. I'm on board. I am trying to share my screen just to show something. I don't know if you remember the buttons that you pressed last time. But so heard. I just want to share, because this actually has more of the info that you talked about. And I just want everybody to know this is what gets published every year. This is an article that comes out. It comes out for almost every city and town, just so that you know. Easton is not being targeted with the dissemination of public information. And the headline is usually X number of people earned more than 200,000 because they want people to read the article. And to all of the points that were made, there are a lot of reasons. So this is not me. There's no agenda. I'm literally just showing you the information that helped me feel confident in sharing public info because I have known about this. This came out May of last year, so 8 months ago. But Keith Nunez, his name is in the first. I'm not putting it there. I'm just saying this is how the newspaper writes. They do it for effect. And exactly to Chris's point, if your takeaway was you stopped there, then you missed the fact that this guy put in probably more hours than anybody else in the entire force. Because when you scroll down, you can see there's a list of the top earners. I'm not going to call out names. You guys can do this for yourself. And when you go down, you can see that top other earnings is a category, and you can search by top other earnings for every single person in our community. You can look at who pulled the most overtime. So to Chris's point, if we all thought that the lieutenant did his work without an incredible amount of sacrifice, we would be misguided in our takeaway. I think he committed an incredible amount of time to our community, and that there were probably a lot of structural reasons that I'm going to put words, but we had to run that overtime, not because he necessarily wanted or we love paying overtime, but because we have to run certain staffing levels. We have to maintain certain amounts of required engagement. And I feel confident that this isn't about why are we paying so much overtime. That said, I am absolutely ready for when somebody gets up at town meeting and says, why don't you just stop paying overtime? Let's have the conversation. I think it's great. Let me talk to you about the top 10 people. I'd like to talk to you exactly why Lieutenant has that much overtime. And guarantee you, all of you, I will have that answer. And it will be the appropriate, factual, actual answer, because I fundamentally believe how we spend our money is to the benefit of every resident in our community. Now, for the record, if Chris, you see some names up here, or Connor, you see some names up here, and what I just said is not true, I hope to God that you would be unbiased enough to raise your hand to say, you know what? We could probably pick up $1 million in cutting overtime. I'm fairly confident that somebody would have shaken that tree before and picked that without a reduction of people because they care so much about their people. So I'm just going to finish going through this, if that's okay. So top OT earners, you can Google overtime earnings if you want. Here's the total. Here's who gets paid what. You can see it's largely predicated upon public safety. And the electrician, candidly, every time you see that person working is us not paying somebody else to do our electrical work. So you can understand why, I don't know how many we have, but one. There you go. Thanks. Now, there's a last section where anybody in the world can explore your data too. You can type in a name. You can get it sorted by all the buckets, to your point, and this is what brought me here, Marissa. And then, just so that you know, this is why I sent the email in the way that I did to Dr. Cabral, I can copy and paste this section out and then grab the next 24 pages and do the sort. So it doesn't matter to me. I felt the fiduciary responsibility to share the visibility. And if somebody on this committee could help and save me an hour and a half of copying and pasting, thanks, because I'm already 3 hours into trying to figure out how we can create visibility and transparency both for our committee and for our residents. So I just hopefully want you all to see this. It's going to come out again in a few months. And if you want to just so that you know, you can go to average teacher salary in Massachusetts. There are flaws in this, but again, ZipRecruiter will give you a range. Massachusetts Department of Higher Education will give you some information, but it's dated. You can usually find Indeed for teacher salary. You can usually go to salary.com. I can tell you LinkedIn will also get it. I encourage you to click in. I encourage you to explore, because you will see in some cases they're really sophisticated that say you can plug in the years of experience, you can plug in number of degrees, and some of them have enough of a database to share with you, like that's what the average salary is for that. And by the way, the highest pay is, you guys won't be shocked, but I don't know, Duxbury, Concord. I'm spitting out names that you all will, Wellesley, and and then some of the big cities have some higher pay as well. But when it comes up in the town meeting and they say, why do we pay our financial planning and analysis people so much, I'll use my job, I'm going to say, well, actually, we indexed it and compared it against all of the community. And what we found is that we're pretty much right in the range. And if anything, we slightly underpay. And I give that credit to people who are great leaders and motivating people to continue to come to work.
If I could just, Marissa, to your point, like, I get it, and Chris as well. I think the challenge that we have is your point is good, as is yours, but that's going to be the case with any quantitative data we use, right? There's never going to be a way that we could fully convey all the contextual and important pieces here. And exactly the example you used, and even using per capita isn't perfect because, really you probably ought to look at like households income, but nonetheless, that's going to get said and is being said. And there will be people who look at the town side and say, oh, I found your problem. You have all these police and firefighters, being paid X or Y. That's going to happen. And so as we're all getting into the beginning of what is going to be an increasingly difficult 4 months, that stuff is going to come up. No offense, Tom, I'm not jumping in to defend you necessarily, but these things do come up. We know. So I'll speak from my own personal experience. When the town went for an operating override in 2016, there was a lot of criticism at that time and our budget books were not back then what they are now. There was a lot of criticism at that time of the town's savings are not where it should be. You didn't plan well. We don't know if our staff are running as lean as they ought to run. We're probably overpaying everyone, right? I mean, these are kind of the default assumptions a lot of folks make with public sector, right? And so that override failed. There was a citizen petition. There was a very expensive operational audit funded that went through not dissimilar to this amount of detail, and came back and said, actually, you staff far less in a lot of your departments than you really ought to, and your salaries are comparable to the market. And that informed how we started presenting budgets and things moving forward. And as we go through this now, I'm a pretty boring person. I don't gamble or bet, but I would bet if I'm wrong, not to put like our employees on the spot, but for our friends of the union, has the fact that the town has $7 million in the stabilization fund not come up?
Yeah, it comes up all the time.
Right. So 9 years ago, in part, when that override failed, there was a lot of sentiment that the town hadn't been prudent enough and saved enough. And we have grown our reserves by 400% since then. We are now facing down a $6.36 million deficit next year. And there are people who will now say, and it might even be the same person, oh, well, you saved too much. Why are we having this conversation? Why are we going through this painful examination of what every single person is paid? Our job and your job on this committee is really, really hard. But what we do not want is if you're at town meeting, and take it from someone who has to do it for a living, and somebody can ask you, did you look at this? And the truthful answer is no. It's over. So again, not getting into the communication aspect, that stuff is really hard, because it feels really invasive, right? And I'm somewhat numb to it at this point, but so I didn't take it that way, but I can understand what you're saying, right? But these are things, there will be people who do that. They're going to take that and find a per capita stat and say, therefore, we shouldn't. But I think as teammates on this committee, it's really about demonstrating, and I didn't hear, and I don't think there was an assessment of, and I trust you do work very hard, right? I mean, you probably wouldn't be on this committee if you didn't. I don't think, like, when I look at that, and again, maybe I'm biased because of my job, or I see the overtime fire or police doing, I don't look at that and say, oh, these people are all overpaid. because I know people are doing more with less in almost all of these jobs, and that includes at the schools. So I don't know how much that's helpful at all, but I do think the concern you raised is real, but that question will be asked, is being asked, perhaps in rooms that we're not in. And so it does. It makes it really hard to navigate through this. And as we go from here to May, it's going to get harder. I'm very encouraged by how open everyone's being tonight. As uncomfortable as some folks seem, I appreciate it. I know it's uncomfortable even to say you're uncomfortable, right? So I appreciate that for whatever that's worth.
Nancy?
I would just add, I think a real learning for us is to be very careful about numbers presented the way they were last time. And Dr. Cabral made a big point about this, that those were gross salaries. They did not include steps. They did not include stipends, that they were, we really need to be careful about showing them that way as compared to ways like this that they're broken out. So, we talked about it. You were very, very good about making those points to be careful about those. And I think we even said that these did not include clubs and things like that. But we have to realize that the public may have a knee-jerk reaction, as you're saying, kind of they're going to see a big number and not really understand the context. So we just need to do a really good job about that people understand what numbers they're looking at, and just as you tried to do, really.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, thoughts, or observations about that? Okay. Agenda item 2. So this is an awesome switch. So literally, agenda item 2 is to try to make sure after we exited item 1, which is exactly the conversation I was hoping we would have, that we all have the ability to look at each other and look at ourselves and recognize at some point we've got to be Team Orange. We have to be about the town. The impact of not making any change and a total reduction of expenses to our town, I will use Connor's word, I think it's a little aggressive, but catastrophic to staffing levels at the schools in the town, if that's the solution.
Can you stop sharing?
Oh, yeah.
Is this coming?
I don't want to. Yeah. I'm not sharing. And what I mean by that is we can either spend the rest of this time to come up with a recommendation, and then focus on our own silos, which we all naturally bring to the table. So I am not saying you shouldn't. However, what we are about to embark upon is asking the community for a meaningful investment to support staffing levels, programs, and services. That's my take on it. I'm not trying to jump the gun, but I've heard enough from most of you to understand where you feel. If you think you should be whole and somebody else shouldn't, I would ask you to make sure you're thinking of the forest from the trees. Because if we start getting into, well, I think it should be the groundskeepers that are kept whole and everybody else can just, that's fine. What will happen is we will not be thinking of the overall town, and we will not be thinking what success looks like, which is the passage and support of whatever we recommend. Now, I'm going to get just numerical and a little bit clinical with you all. It is a mathematical formula for how many votes you need to have to come to get an approval and a recommendation. You can go back. You can literally Google Massachusetts overrides, and there'll be a database of overrides for the last 25 years for every town and city. You can see which ones passed, which ones failed. You can quickly do a number of percentage of votes required in order to get things passed, and a number of percentage of votes that don't. I can assure you that somewhere between 4,000 to 6,000 people will show up at Easton, give or take. Dottie, you can correct me if I'm wrong on round numbers. And I can assure you that you need somewhere between 2,800 to 3,700 to vote to support whatever you want to do. The only way that you can get there is by investing an incredible amount of time in educating some very important groups. The groups are in this room. Teachers are an incredibly impactful group. There are a number of people in our community who care passionately for the education, I would say an overwhelming amount. They care about the efforts that our teachers put forth. Easton is an incredible school district, all things being equal, especially when you consider how much investment we give people. But to be a high school at 35 now, I'm sorry, we got bumped back one, I believe, out in the state, like that's impressive because we are well below the state spend average. So like we're doing great. And I just want to make sure that people in this room know we get there successfully by helping people appreciate the great work that the teachers in our educational system provide and the educational leaders give. We get there because people care about public safety, public works, and that they know how many people care and do more with less, how we send less than ideal number of people to emergency events at times, how we rely on our neighboring communities at times, and how much people work in overtime and give. And they do more with less, right? So we need their whole contingent to come and vote. And then you also need to get enough people to say, it's for the greater good. I don't really care about public safety and public works. I mean, like, I want it to work, but that's great. I don't have any kids in the school system, so that's, I don't know, I could get. But I do get that there's a greater good by investing in my community, that there's a return on me and my home, and that there's a clear correlation between investment in one's community and school system and home value. And hopefully there's a logical group out there that can understand we're not here because we did something wrong. We're not here because we waste money. We're not here because we're here because of what we care about, like open space and 1/3 not being taxable. And so we're asking you to help us solve the problem together and invest in our community, our people, our teachers. So to me, I just want to emphasize and ask you all, if you don't feel the same way, let it be known now, because to Dottie's point, we have to be on the same team. We can bicker, fight, disagree with how things were done, but if we don't get 19 people going to market, getting 50 people to vote the way we want them to get them to get 50 people to vote the way we want to do the public safety project was hundreds of meetings in people's homes, in buildings, at coffee shops, I need you guys to understand the depth of give to get whatever you want. I can tell you when I get up in May, I will do the best I can to educate people. I will give you guys as much of the time as I possibly can between now and then. I will hold morning coffee sessions like Nancy and I are talking from 6:30 to 8 at the Beanery. So anybody in the town wants to come by and talk to us, come on by every Tuesday, we're here. We might get 3 people a day and Nancy and I will run out of things to talk about in the 3rd week, but that's okay. My point is, whether or not we succeed in May of 2025 will depend as to whether or not 19 people are Team Orange. You can definitely be passionate about what you are uniquely focused on, but we need to come together. And so I can tell you I care about the 40 to 80 people. That's where I will net after we all go through our presentations. That's what I'm focused on. I'm not too focused on something that's 50 grand or 100 grand or 150 grand. Not that it's immaterial, but it's just not the magnitude when we're talking $6 to $8 million problem. That's where I just let other people figure that out. That can come up in a budget discussion that will happen after this meeting. So that's the other thing. I appreciate the luxury this committee has. So we're going to recommend something, whatever it is, whether it's painful, $6 to $8 million, and I'm sorry to go longer, but hopefully this is helpful for Team Orange. And then the real problem is everybody else has to figure it out. Connor and Leisha, the school committee, the select board have to figure out a model that cuts with no override. That says somehow, here's how we will get there. That's going to be a pretty crappy exercise. Then there'll be a model that says level state. That might be $8 million override, as you'll see. That's going to be very different discussion, but it's level state. It's not even getting ahead. So where I'm going with it is, I know we all have heard that there are negotiations to be done for all the unions. They're all coming up. You all have to do that work after this. I hope you get there with money to have a discussion about. Because otherwise you're going to get there and there'll be a discussion about here's how we're going to reduce to literally get to the money that we have. And I just hope people can put aside those discussions that have to happen appropriately so during those discussions. And right now, in May, we can get you to even have a budget to have some of that discussions with. That's where I'm coming out on Team Orange. And I don't know, I called it Team Orange. My shirt's not ironed because it just got shipped in from Amazon. So $19 if anybody wants one, I'll fund it.
So a ton of PFAS in it.
Probably. Yeah, sorry, I'm glowing in the dark. But look, I know, and I'm so glad, Kathy, that you opened it with the way you did and the visibility and how you felt with the way you did, because I really need to make sure people come back to, like, you won't get another person in your corner to make sure we hopefully give all the resources to our town and schools that you guys could possibly use to work with. Because I believe and have seen personally that the single largest investment in my life, my home, has increased exponentially because of what, candidly, our town provides. So I am passionate about it. I care deeply about it. I regret deeply that I did not, in the last meeting, convey key things in a constructive way, and it led to damaging a relationship and potentially damaging our committee. And hopefully after the first part, we can be Team Orange at some point. So I love your feedback. I'm sorry. I know I talked a lot, and I know this is longer than we might have thought, but if we're not 19 people getting 50 people, it's a math game. I can tell you, we have to be together. Anybody? You could say that sucked. You could say that was awesome. Just give me some feedback. Like, are we gonna, does anybody feel like we can't be Team Orange? Does anybody feel like they are required to not be Team Orange? That I have to.
I feel you got to stop saying Team Orange, man.
You don't like the
That's
Team
bad.
Orange for Easton color?
Northern Ireland. You know, I mean,
Oh, God, I didn't.
William
even-
of Orange you're talking about.
So Chris, put it in your own words. Like, are you picking up what I'm laying down? Because I'm not feeling that everybody here is on the same
You shouldn't
team.
be feeling it because I
Or we
can't get
are.
past Team Orange. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say it out loud.
That's okay. But what team are we? Are you and I aligned that we want to
no.
go and do everything we can to help this town understand the implications of what's to come?
In a dorky way, yes.
Fine. I love you too, man. That's what I got. I don't know what kind of chocolate you like for Valentine's Day, but I'm going to hook you up. But I want, look, I hope you all feel that way. And for the record, everybody here will be disappointed. Nobody will get 100%, let alone 110% of what you think is the priority that should happen. I don't think you will. But I hope we appreciate that if everybody got 80 to 90%, that is absolutely the greater good to enable the next 5 to 10 years of our community to figure it out. If you don't like the way Tom Broussard's budget goes, go to the Tom Broussard committee meetings, run for it, get on it, and vote Tom Broussard out and make policy change that way. It's a longer process, but like get involved and do that. But I want to enable the ability for people to have the discussions in May of 2025 that doesn't start with, we didn't get it. Sorry.
We've been meeting every other week since Labor Day, marathon meetings. There's no way I've personally invested all this time to not be 100% committed to whatever this committee does as an outcome. And I would venture to guess everybody here who comes to all these meetings feels the same way. So
Sure.
Let's move on to the next item.
Cool.
So that we're not
Does
here
somebody
till
else want to say
11
something?
I don't know. Not to undermine my boss on TV, but I think it's important to not make that just assume it should be unsaid. I mean, I think, Tom, what you're asking is, does anyone feel differently about, like, we don't even know where everyone's going to land, but at a certain point, PASE's job is, we spent hundreds of hours, all of these meetings, and this is what we think is the best option. Doesn't mean it's not painful, doesn't mean it's not challenging, but.
So I want, I'm all in. So I hope that goes unsaid, but I'll say it. Right?
Appreciate
I'm
it.
all in.
Helps other people hear it too.
I've done the sign holding, I've done the door knocking, I've done the hosting stuff. I'm all in. So I have, and this may be jumping to solutioning. So if it's later in this discussion, then we can park it. I guess what I'm struggling with is knowing what it takes to get an override. Is that timing between now and whenever that happens. Again, if that is the recommendation, and I'll just put it out there, there's no way on the school committee that I'm going to advocate for an expense side reduction. I'm just not, I know how important all of that is.
Sure.
So I'm out there. But knowing, I just like, and again, maybe this is Connor, Alicia, I know you're aware of the timing issue that we have on the school side, right? With like, if the proposal is we're gonna go for an override and announce it in May, or the goal is to get a vote in May or whatever, like we're too far past cycle for
Sure.
schools. And you mentioned negotiation meetings, like, we had one today.
Yeah.
We are doing it right now. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm struggling, and I'll appreciate if we can really maybe have a very, as transparent as we can be.
We will.
About timing and all that.
Yeah,
That's
so
later
can
in
we
the
park
evening?
it until after we all agree on a solution?
Okay.
And then that way, we have already thought about what the calendar looks like. And our goal, I think, as a team, we voiced this 2 meetings ago, we want to give an indication to the community, which you're a part of, and to all its constituents and leaders, of where PACE is leaning. Because if we come out and our vote is it's a reduction, glad you guys know that now. I think we mentioned how important it is for people to kind of get a read as soon as possible about a posture. So that's why we've accelerated this discussion, so that, to your point tonight, we will end it with everybody's going to give the size of the challenge. What do you think the solution is? And then that will net us, if it is an override, we have a calendar that's prepared for how that would look like, so that we can walk this team through for what that process could look like and give a little bit of insight to a lot of different constituent bodies that are trying to figure this all out. So your head's in the right space.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Do you want to say something first? Or?
No, he was
I guess
probably
I
going to do
would
the
just
calendar.
Reiterate, yes, I'm all in. Yes, I definitely think we need to look at an override. But whatever we decide, I think what I'm hearing you say, Tom, whether you want to call it Team Orange or anything else less dorky.
Not Team Orange anymore, not going to take this off.
We need to be unified. We need to have a unified message, a unified front. Any division among us weakens the position.
That's right.
And that's where we need to be. We might have personal things that we think this, that, or the other thing, but they can't come out in our public comments. They really can't, because we need to keep this strong. And the only way to keep this strong is to have a unified position.
And it doesn't mean you have to drink the Kool-Aid. I think what we're hopeful for is that if we all say the answer is 6, and I personally felt like the answer was 5, I think I can see the forest from the trees and articulate to residents that while it might not have been the exact number I looked for, I absolutely support in principle the fact that we're coming to market and that the need is great and that the call to action is important. And I would ask, if you're stuck and that's the 1 million that puts you over the edge, can we talk about that? Like, I can't believe that we would be out there, and I would staunchly be against 6 million, but I would support with every fiber of my being 5 million, and I wouldn't be able to articulate to somebody, look, is it perfect what I wanted? No, but is it in line with the greater good of what we're trying to accomplish? Yes, and let me tell you about how lean we run. Let me tell you about our revenue challenge that we as residents created, right? Like, I share that. Like, we think we did this, or the town did that, or like, we residents approve every budget. So I take ownership of that as a resident. I approved every one of those salaries is the way I look at it. I know everybody does. So I'm okay with them. Like, I get it. But I am numb in a lot of ways. So I appreciate that. So I'm hearing, not to put everybody in the spot, but I appreciate the sentiment because it is important. If anybody is not aligned with that at any point, reach out to me, reach out to Nancy, reach out to Connor or Alicia. They are professional enough to put things in context. Reach out to Dottie or Jen. Like, they are leaders in our community that can also, it doesn't have to come to us because we have the titles of what we do. I would just ask you to go to somebody in our community that has experienced an awful lot so they can give you the fullest response of all the other things that go into the answer. And I trust all of the people that I just mentioned immensely. And they could just say, by the way, anonymously, somebody had this feeling last week, like Denise does with residents. Okay, here's the 4 inquiries I got. So that's what I'm hopeful for going forward. Please.
I'm just overwhelmed to like not even know where to begin or end the conversation. I believe the facts that were presented, and I trust the sides that have presented, that they've given us factual information. What I'm concerned about is whatever we go forward with, that we've got a bigger problem. It just doesn't get fixed by an override. And I think that our charge is not just to present what fixes it today. I think we've got, and I think I even said this in the very first meeting, we've got bigger problems that are coming. And when I read this stuff, it's compounded year after year. So can you fix it today? Maybe we can fix it today. And maybe that fixes it for tomorrow, but, you know, how sustainable is it? Can we
Love
ask
it.
ourselves, how sustainable is it?
Love it.
Okay, because taxpayers don't just have the town of Easton. You know, there's news that we talked about today. The federal government. So I think that we need to also not make our decision without the bigger bubble,
Agreed.
without the bigger discussion.
So some people will think that we paid you lots of money to say what you just said. And the reason is, in our slide presentation today, we are introducing to you a 5-year concept because you will see that there is a sustainable question. So what is sustainable? Literally, like what horizon? Is it 5? So most, it's not less than 5, candidly. And it's usually not more than 10. And so we focused on 5 to elicit the exact same type of thought dialogue that you just shared. And it factors into what you choose.
Sorry, 5 years?
5 years.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. So in other words, we as a team have to define sustainability. It's candidly, the short answer is between 5 and 10. So I'm flexible on what you want to pick. We did 5. Wendy did a tremendous amount of work. And I did a separate model to illustrate how to think about the tool so that when you get it given to you after tonight's meeting, you can do the same with all the information you learned. And then that might inform the size of the problem that you have in your mind. And it'll help you understand a frame of reference for thinking what is sustainable. And there are other things. So we say, I said, I'll use me as an example, that I would prefer not to lose people. I believe we want level service. We want to support people. We want to continue to provide the programs and services that they provide. Under my model, with my assumptions, if you do an $8 million override, by year 4, you're still out of money. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's not like we did something wrong. It's exactly acknowledging what you said, that there are fundamental structures in the town of Easton that will never go away. It's just the way we are. Like, we chose to have 1/3 of our town protected. We chose to live in a state, well, I'm not sure, but the state of Massachusetts has 2.5% property override. And the new growth, in my assumptions, I challenged the town to get better on new growth. They have to go figure that out. Like, I think, to your point, when we, sorry, that was probably a little cavalier, but it wasn't aggressive. But to your point, if we decide that there will be an operational override that adds revenue, I believe we have an obligation to define the other things and structures that need to be adjusted for sustainability. So for me, one of the things I'd recommend in a memorandum of understanding or a covenant of agreements would be some facet of, I'd like to understand our zoning policies and rules as compared to other towns and communities that successfully demonstrate new growth while preserving the essential elements of Easton. I'd like to understand what our setbacks are. Maybe nothing changes. I just don't know, but I want to understand because I feel like we have an obligation to grow new growth. And so as part of me agreeing and recommending this override, I also want to put covenants in that might say something like no new debt exclusion override in 10 years. Maybe, I don't know. Unless you get a vote of 500 people so that, or an emergency has come up. The state requires us to put triple filtration in on every water, and that's a $10 million thing. All right, that wasn't in our purview. Same thing, like I want to commit to no additional operational override for X number of years. We may want to commit to, here's what the average percentage increase can be for departments on a rolling 3-year period. So that what doesn't happen is next year, the Tom Broussard department puts forth a 25% growth. Like, yeah, no, we're incurring pain. We are asking our residents to commit to a very large tax bill increase. So we are gonna make potentially commitments back to them of things we will do and won't do, so that it changes the sustainability picture. How do we grow more than $1 million a year? Maybe we need to change zoning. Maybe it's not X number of feet setback. Maybe it's a Y number of feet setback. I don't know, but I'd like to put in that we want to get smart about that so that we can solve for some new growth in the future. There might be other things too up and down the P&L. I'm just picking on that to illustrate. So the reason why I say it, Denise, is you're going to literally see that to come. And the 5-year picture is not good. For all the reasons we know. It's just a math game. I hate to say it. Do you guys want to move on to that?
Good segue.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
All right. Dottie, I'm going to share again. Well done, Dottie. Well done. So everybody will get this model afterwards. Wendy and I might clean it up and maybe highlight some input cells and make it easier for you to navigate and protect some cells so you don't break it. We're uniquely Excel literate. So, but what we did, I say we very loosely, what Wendy really did was she took the time to lay out, and I'm just going to look at the first column. In the first column, oh, I swear I didn't do anything. All I did is click.
The computer does not agree with you.
It doesn't agree at all.
What was the thing that you had to refresh last time that Patrick was telling you?
Actually, it only worked after you shut down and rebooted that computer. Like jumped out and jumped in. Because on my end, it's not a toggle. It's
Things went wrong.
Should have stayed.
Because Honor left it.
He went to go pull a cord.
right.
That plugged you in the other room.
I think we need to just exit the meeting and shut down the computer and reboot.
We can't.
Oh.
We have people watching on Zoom, so that would kick off.
Oh.
I think if we stop sharing, I think there's a screen protector on this that makes it very non-responsive.
I will unplug. I have unplugged.
I thought it was your thing that you.
No, last time it was when, remember, everything crashed and we had to take a hiatus for 10 minutes. Patrick was over there, and then finally he rebooted the computer. It's because there's a network communication issue between Bird Dog NDI. You want me to plug back in and you can give it a try?
Let's try.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not gonna.
Leave it plugged in. You're plugged in, right?
I am, sir.
Can you call Joe for phone a friend?
Hey, Joe. Tech support. Do you mind swinging by and potentially maybe you could help us solve a HDMI network connection issue with presenting from a laptop to the HDMI? We'll take honest goes. So while
Why don't we
Joe's...
take a 5-minute pause?
Yeah, why don't we take 5 minutes? Appreciate that. Thanks, Joe. Thank you. All right, so we were just about to talk about and enter in discussion of agenda item 4, multi-year budget forecast. Wendy and I think, can navigate this, and we'll certainly look to Connor and Dr. Cabral to add color when we go through it. But the key is to hopefully give you folks a tool that you can now go back with to say, well, here's what I'm thinking. What does that create as a financial consequence on a go-forward basis? So what you'll see in column J is the 26 projected budget. The budget yields under this model, a deductive minus 5.5. There's then alternate pace adjustments. So again, for just making sure the model worked, we plugged in assumptions around leveraging an override, utilization of some free cash, and then, understanding that from the initial proposed budgets, that can we find ways to make additional adjustments and, some capital outlay, and that gets us to the surplus of $6 million just for that particular group of adjustments. So when you add those two together, you can see that if we did those 5 or 6 things, then you would have a surplus of $519,000. Now, how this 80 grand is reduced or the $1 million is reduced, that's not an opinion. That's just like, look, if we were able to get a 5% and a 6% increase, that's what we would get. You can plug in whatever you want into the pace adjustment columns to do your own work. You could put in 0 override and put in utilization of all free, whatever you want. Again, I would ask you try to be as forest from the trees as you can, thinking about what we're trying to accomplish after we've given the recommendation. That gives, I'm just going to scroll to the bottom. So we're good for FY26 under that scenario. Mic drop. Sorry. That is going to market with a $7 million operational override. Every $1 million of increase is approximately $110 of tax on the average taxpayer. So that's a $770 tax impact. Okay? Now, if you did that, this is Wendy's model, by the way, so I'm going to get into what this model does. If you did that according to her model, you have the similar problem beginning year 2. So solve, to your point, Denise, 2026, yay. We're going to have this discussion again in 2027. And then by the time you get to 2028 and 2029, you're having the same order of 7-figure challenges. How we got there, and this is important, this is Wendy's model. I happen to have a different model. It's okay. Nobody's right or wrong. Wendy put in this particular column in column P of, look, we're going to grow our base by 2.5%. That's a pretty sound assumption. The average growth for fixed, for new growth in her model is 750, 750, 900, and $1 million. Reasonable. I wouldn't, none of these things, by the way, would I say, oh my God, this is egregious. I can't believe we're even doing this. What are we doing? We've kept exempt debt level, diff transfer level, pretty reasonable, makes sense. I think this assumption is an average $50 per pupil. So that might be right or wrong, so you can change it.
Yeah, I didn't want to put $30.
It could be worse.
Could be worse.
Yeah,
could be
I mean,
30.
the state minimum is 30.
But they just came out last week with the preliminary, right?
Yes, the governor's budget is
But that could
proposing
be
75, but that could be
changed.
iterated. Yes, it could be iterated on by the House or Senate, even if it
Ways
lands
and
at
means, and then it goes back to governor.
right. But even if they land there, one important piece, because calendars actually are going to matter a ton here. We're not going to know what that is. The state's budget is almost always adopted. Massachusetts is actually famous as one of the last states that adopts a fiscal year budget in the country. So we're not going to know. So we usually go with the state's current proposal. 50. I mean, so it's 30 statutorily. 1 year it was 60. Recently, 1 year was 104. The current proposal is 75. So I think that's where 50 perhaps comes from.
Yeah, I
But
just
even-
I wanted to put 30, but I didn't want to necessarily overly inflate it too, because it could always go back to 30.
Sure.
So I
Dr.
thought 50
Cabral?
was middle of the road. Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
of Wendy probably. When you're doing this exercise, I'm presuming new growth and those projections you're making are based on no substantive changes or recommendations to how business is done, because we haven't done that yet. So I'm presuming you're doing this with like status quo. If this committee were not to recommend any aggressive new growth or scale back building codes or whatever, I have no idea. That this is without any of that, right?
Right.
Okay.
So
Conservative.
that's a
Okay.
good
Yeah, but
point.
that's a good question.
But I also want to share, we all have context for that. Meaning, we know last year was the best year we've ever had, and we had $1.5 million. And if you want to put that in, you can. Remember, you have to balance your budget. So if halfway through the year you're not in the right trajectory, you'll solve that with expense reductions. The average of 750 to 900 to 100 to $1 million, I'm going to add words, but I think you did it this way, assumes we actually do get better. That we're going to make progress of changing zoning, or we're going to, whatever towns do to foster new growth, I won't pretend to be an expert, maybe you have a dedicated person who cold calls everybody to try to get people to come to town. Maybe you have an industrial work park initiative that you go and partner with the state for development, but those things take a couple of years to get there.
So if people are manipulating this chart and they, for example, want to have a presumption of new growth, they probably have some ideas to share about, like there should be a caveat there.
Yeah.
I'm going to recommend we get there by doing this, this, and this.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, like I would.
You can't just plug $3 million in there and be like, guys, I
Right.
fixed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? Because
I wish I could.
Right.
That would be so much easier.
I'd have a lot more Wednesday nights.
That's what I presumed, but I didn't
Good
want
call.
to presume.
That's great.
No, it's a really good point.
Great question.
But we also have to balance that out. There's a lot of people in the community that don't want to see any growth. So, there's a balance there. It's not something that in year 1 or 2 or even by year 4 or 5 that I think we're going to see anything meaningful. We don't have the capacity, I don't think.
You can't change the 1/3 is not taxable.
Exactly.
So
Connor?
I think a really important thing here too is we could adopt a more pro-growth posture. We're working on important growth things like intermunicipal agreements for sewer, for areas of town we know we need more sewer in. And there could be a massive recession, right? And then of course it's better than having anti-growth posture, which I'm not necessarily saying we have, and a recession, to have a pro-growth posture in a recession. But so I think we're all kind of saying the same thing of like, we, to Denise's point, need to recognize that this isn't like, okay, here we recommend this one thing and it's fixed. There's underlying structural force here, inherent to the way local government is run in Massachusetts, that are fundamentally unsustainable.
Agreed.
But that we wouldn't want to throttle the growth too much. But I don't think that that's exclusive, means that the committee can't then say, we recommend there's a more welcome approach to growth.
Of course.
Right.
So going down this list, everybody has the budget for all the years before. So you can see that, look, unrestricted general government aid usually increases by this % each year. You can go back and do that on your own with budgets, or in this file, Wendy was kind enough to give us the recent X number of years, actual, so that you can see, like, look, unrestricted government aid was 2.5, 2.6. I bet you it was a 2.4 in the year before. Like, to Connor's point, just so that you understand, like, you can't go say, oh, it's going to go up to 7 million next year. Like, not unless somehow we're running for governor and we can decide in 1 year how we're going to give all the money to Easton. So that's, to your point, Dr. Cabral, like, you have enough here through our conversations, discussions, and information to make informed decisions out of anybody in our community as to what these line items should be. I'm just hiding this because I wanted to be able to see it all. There's an assumption that local receipts will increase by 4%. That's an assumption. It's logical, it's historical, nothing wrong with that. Personally, you'll see in my model, I want to challenge us to say, maybe you need to charge $150 for every license that used to be $50. I don't like it. I don't know what the impact would be. I'm going to ask that question, so I'm not just assuming that's the right answer. but maybe that has to happen because we know we can get that, right? Like people still have to get a plumbing inspection. So will they like it? No. Is it new growth oriented? Kind of not, but you see where I'm going with it. Then if you come down, like the stabilization fund, I don't think we all want to use the stabilization fund in all the future years. Maybe you do.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that I put a line in there called the override stabilization fund. And so that's not the general stabilization fund. What that represents is if you have a surplus the previous year, a budgetary surplus, you then plug that into the next fiscal year's budget. So
we're not
that's the
squirreling
same
away
number as that
unused money.
surplus
Like,
on the bottom.
It's not a money grab. Whatever you get is going to be used in the future years. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that.
It is important, though, that there is some kind of reserve. The last time we did have an operating override, that was one of the things that we tried to be very conscious of to make the override last. You had to put some money away and reserve it so that you could use it in future years. And what this clearly shows is that $519,000 is not enough.
It's not for future years. Look, I'm going to try to make progress through the rest of this to get to a punchline, and then if it's okay, we'll circle back, if that's okay, just so that you guys understand the mechanics. These are smaller amounts, but they've been kept level, just so that you know. And for the large part, they aren't adjusted. We're not going to grow septic loan receipts magically. Opioid settlement funds is consistent. So again, you can adjust that, but the reality. This is where it gets challenging. So there's no right or wrong, but this model has level exempt debt. We kind of know that. We have an assumption of how we're going to grow non-exempt debt. This is the big one. I just want you to know that you're going to get the punchline now. Every point that changes can make or break your budget year. And I will illustrate it on the next page. One
Just for
point
people's benefit,
on
what that is.
That's employee benefits and insurance. So last year it went up 10 points. This year it's going up 12 points. That's 10 points on $22 million, $24 million item. So nothing changed and you're paying $2.4 million more to have your benefits. So that has nothing to do with anything else, right? So right away we're eating up a chunk of what our normal taxation increase is. If that increases by 9% each year to come, that's the killer. I, in my model, have not been at 9. I said, I'm going to challenge the system to be at 6. And the reason, I don't have an answer, so full disclosure, I don't have an answer. But from a mathematical standpoint, it's very difficult to have something that's nearly 1/5 of your budget increase at 10 to 12%, which is 3 to 4 times the increase of your largest revenue taxation base. It's a math game. So I don't know what my recommendation means. So I'm very thoughtful that it might not work. But if you don't touch on the expense side, employee benefits, I can tell you there's not other places that you'll make a meaningful impact like that line item. I'm just giving you an answer to the test. You want to change expense structure meaningfully, you're going to have to come up with what you think insurance is going to do for the next 5 years. No pressure.
Does that include retiree benefits in there too?
Yes.
That's the whole
So that,
kit and caboodle.
Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, that consolidates the active and retiree health benefits that the 75% of premiums of the town pays for town and school, existing and retirees, as well as property casualty liability insurance, workers' comp insurance for both town and school, and pension assessment payments back to Bristol County for non-educators. And that is, to Tom's point, and I hope some of you folks have roasted my budget presentations early on in our journey. I don't know if they got better, but I really wanted to highlight in the fiscal 26 budget that, to Tom's point, something that's fundamentally changed really in the past 2 years for us is we have been kind of nursing and dealing with, being a minimum aid community and these other challenges for a long time. But when you have those benefits going up at that rate, there's no amount of kind of maneuvering that's going to get you out of that way. And so the assumptions that people think make sense on that escalation, and Tom's going to get there, but make an enormous difference.
Yeah.
Because it's not town and school operating budgets that are going up 9 or 10%.
The county school assessment, again, that's a historical increase, 10%. We have to do it by state law. Like there's a certain amount that we have to provide to them. I understand, right? Like it's not discretionary.
They make an assessment as a regional school body back to the member communities based on their budget, based on Chapter 70, and based on the amount of students from your community who are going. And that's been another area that's been growing really dramatically. A much smaller baseline, but I mean, that's pushing 35 to 40% in 2 years.
So order of magnitude, you want to save a point on the regional county school assessment because you think we're too aggressive, and maybe it will be less than that. That's 200 grand. You save a point on insurance, it's 2.4 million.
But you can't just unilaterally change insurance, right?
Well, so there's assumptions. So back to the old adage, you can almost make any data set show you what you want, if you want. And that's why we're trying to be very transparent, that over the last 2 years, it's been an 11% increase on average. And against the last 2 years, 10% looks looks aggressive and risky. If you increase the sample set to the last 5 years percentage growth, then your increase is not averaging 11, it's averaging, maybe it's 5 or 6, I'll get you the exact number. So you get to choose. Do you want to go into your budget next year on your largest single influential ticket item with a risk profile that says, it's not the last 2 years, it's the last 5. I'll put 6% down. If you're wrong, every 1% is a $2.4 million problem. If you're right, then we were actually more accurate and we can go longer. But you're going to see in my model, I put 6, which is aggressive, and we still run out in the third year.
But you're talking about projecting what the GIC will come in as, and I meant you can't just say, well, we'll just change employee benefits.
Oh, completely. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, no, you're right. Thank you. Yeah, we can't, the solve for your insurance is not easy. I can't just drop Blue Cross and pick up United Healthcare, let alone as a private individual, I can only do that once per year. But we're public, where that 6 to 9 is candidly, you're picking the stock market for the next 5 years and making a guess. And do I think that we will go down, we will go up? And I'm sure at some point, whatever we decide tonight for a recommendation, I would recommend you do it. What are the levers? I can't not ask that question. We have to know how could we impact $24 million of spend? Because if it is 10%, I hate to tell you, we got a problem. You're asking for $7 million and people aren't happy about that, you're gonna be out of money next year, and next year we'll be talking about what are the reductions we're doing. None of the fact pattern's gonna change. Next year, it's gonna be 84% of our spend is people and salaries and programs and services that they do. Nothing, that's not gonna change on the margins. You guys know what I'm saying.
I think, if
Go
I
for
may,
it.
the question is the only control factor, you call them levers, for that the cost of GIC, or are there other ways to make that number smaller?
So at some point, I think we'll ask them if we go that.
Okay,
If
so I
we
think
all
that's
vote
what
that
we're
this is an
asking.
expense reduction,
Okay.
then we don't need to answer that question, if that's okay. But once we have all aligned on what the solution will be, then I agree. I think it is that. I don't know if you want to get into it
I'm happy
now.
to talk about it. I mean,
Okay, let me
you're-
finish, and then
yeah.
that can be the first
And we'll-
topic.
That'll be the first thing we talk about.
Yep.
Sure.
Because that way we can illustrate the size of the challenge we have. Town and school budgets. So you obviously have heard that FY26, that the town budgets, sorry, Dr. Cabral, I see you squinting and it pains me. I apologize.
No, it's my own eyes.
No, it's okay. You can move up if you want.
No, no, it's okay. It's all right.
This assumes a 3.5% escalation for, on average, all the years to come. And we know this year the ask is north of 3.5%, right? So where I'm going with it is you can change that and it's meaningful. If you said on the town side, change it by 1%, it's a very similar expense structure as the benefits. It's 22.5 million. You'll save 2.25 million. So, but
250,000, right, for each 1%.
yes, sorry, 250,000. Sorry, thank you for correcting.
But that adds up fast.
Right.
Yeah.
So you want to just understand what we're going to in terms of where we have been in historical increases. So, but this is, in a way, you're dictating policy with whatever you put in here. part of the memorandum, if we all say that we want to do, there's going to be some form of increased revenue, may be a commitment that there are certain levels of escalation that we all sign up and agree to. That while we recommend may not be factual, because again, there are certain mechanisms that in time people have access to. But like if we're asking people for money, we probably want to come up with, here's what the future looks like for you. So that they don't think, oh, it's a 6% increase this year, and every year it's going to be 6%. That's not what people are trying to do. And as you can tell, the largest increase of the benefits is an impact there of that.
Could you
Does that sound
also
good?
speak to the, next to town and school under the adjustment column, the 80,000 and the 1,094,000?
Yes. So this already assumes, for whatever reason, this you can take this out or you can put it in, that the town and the schools will already find savings against what they've already given us. I don't know how. I don't know if they can do that.
Yeah, so specifically that what is showing a reduction is a reduction in the requested increase.
The corrected
right?
that
So,
we've
so
been
you
working
see
with.
in column N, 26 versus 25 difference, 5 on town, 6 on school. And when you go back to K, that's what that looks like. And that reflects the preliminary numbers that are in there for the level service of about 5.3 on town and 8.2 or 8.02 for schools.
But just so that if you want, if you assume, oh, hopefully my computer did not get unhappy. I deleted it hoping that it would flow through. So hopefully my computer catches up.
Kind of looks like it's on your code.
Yeah, there's a.
Well,
I think there
see,
was
the
an issue with
formula
that
is still
formula.
hard-coded. My computer's frozen.
Yeah.
But my point is, you can remove those. And when you remove those, it'll go back to the original, closer to the original budget request of
8.2.
8.2, right? So that's okay. Like, we're just doing this for illustrative purposes. So
Exactly. Yep.
this is, in that column, what was represented is you ask the residents for another 7 million, and you ask the town and school to cut 1.8 million. And if you do that, then you have $519,000 that you have a surplus that rolls into year 2. Now, you can change the 3.5, you can make it 2.5. You might say that's unrealistic. It has to be 5. Like, I know it's going to be more. Go ahead. But this all gets back to Denise's question about what is sustainability. I'm posing to the team, I would argue sustainability is not having the same discussion next year or in year 3, or preferably not even 4 or 5, but I would be okay with 4 and 5 being a problem and saying we have 3 years to figure that out, potentially, depending upon the size of the problem. So you all should figure out what sustainable looks like for you. It has to be a minimum of 5 years. I think we have to commit to the residents that this will not go forward.
So your spreadsheet's frozen?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to touch on the benefits thing while you see if your computer wants to cooperate?
Yeah, sure.
You may want to.
I'm going to unplug if you want to. Oh, I can
You're
unplug.
sharing
Yeah.
through Zoom. You may want to unshare through Zoom.
Exactly. Done.
And while you maybe want to reboot.
Yeah, I might
That
have
looks
to.
good.
Sounds like it's dying.
Okay. So I guess first thing is I sent the budget to everyone. Did everyone at least take like a passing glance at it?
Yes.
Okay. So that large bucket of employee benefits and insurances, we call it a fixed cost for a good reason, is that we have very little ability to immediately influence it, but it would be misleading, in my opinion, to tell the public. It means like it's impossible and we can't even talk about it or look at it. So a big driver of that, and I think, I won't look because the slide's there, but that would be cheating, but I think it's 11.5 million, I'm saying, for healthcare. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's almost 50% of that general bucket. The overwhelming majority the majority of that is, so active town employees, 2.2 million, active school employees, 5.1 million, then retirees, town retirees, 1.3 million, school retirees, 2.8 million. As we've discussed quite a bit, the overwhelming majority of our workforces are they're part of collective bargaining agreements. You couldn't setting moral issues and morale issues aside, you can't just say, oh, we have a budget problem, we're just cutting the premium coverage the town offers, right, which is $75. If you have a healthcare plan, it costs $100. Easton pays $75. The employee picks up the other $25 in their payroll deductions. You can't, without bargaining, move that number, right? Which makes sense because that's a material change in the net take-home pay that any employee has. And that doesn't mean that those discussions don't ever come up at the table. They may, but it has to be mutually agreed on. Not talking about Easton, right? So take a hypothetical town looking at this, and Chris, I'll put you on the spot, but not that we've ever negotiated a contract. But I'll say I'm on the labor side, right? If an employer comes to me and says, hey, we're having this budget challenge, we want to shift. The budget challenge that we're having is if the premiums are going up 12%. That means that the impact of every employee's paycheck is an increase of 12% on what they're paying too, right? And so if we go to them, or if my manager comes to me, because I'm on the labor side in this scenario, and says, so we need to move from 70-25 to 50-50, then what that means is that instead of that employee's payroll deductions going up by 12% that year, they're going up by 100%, or really probably 124% or something like that. No union is going to say, oh, sure. That sounds good. Maybe me as the labor side of the table, you trade and say, well, then it's got to be made up on wages or something. And so maybe it's a wash, right? And maybe there's a complex long-term thought process of, well, right now, healthcare is growing faster, so moving things there might be out of there. But the point is, it's not something that PASE or a town administrator or a superintendent or anyone can just point to and say, move that, right? So that's really important. Retiree benefits are set by select boards, and those can be adjusted. Now, there's important budget implications there. There's important kind of moral questions there. And I'm not weighing in on that. I'm just saying that those are distinct from an active employee in a union, right? But even in that case, the majority of that large 11.5 million estimate is for active employees, can't just be unilaterally shifted. The retiree ones are able to be adjusted, right? So then there's other cost drivers in fixed costs, including pension payments, which again we don't control. We have a little ability to influence. We are part of a regional retirement system, which is for Bristol County. And if you do an early pay, you get a half point sometimes of a discount.
I forget what you save over at least $100.
Yeah, it's a six-figure number. So we make sure to early pay, and that's helpful. But we can't kind of go back to the county and negotiate and say this funding schedule is ridiculous, because that's what the county is attempting to do, is to reach a full funded ratio at some point that I sarcastically and jokingly say is always 6 years away. But because they don't want everyone to be on a pay-go basis where the county that's paying pensions, they need to be able to cover those defined benefit pensions. And so years and years and years and years ago, folks in defined benefit plans like the one that Easton is a member of in a region were not paying as much out of their paychecks. And this is something I think your average person may not even know, because a lot of people do, and it's uncomfortable, and people, no one wants to look like they're going after someone's retirement, but it's multiple millions of dollars of a budget, right? So that's not, the town doesn't take that 6.6 million and cut checks to our retirees. That's going back into a system that those folks did pay into their whole lives, right? And everyone who's working, right, depending on their date of hire, pays a percent of their weekly pay into that system. And as generations go on, they increase that percent because they're sharpening their pencils and saying, oh, we can't cover these benefits, right? And so, now folks are doing 9% plus 2 on, I think, anything over 30,000 salary, which is, meaningfully higher than Social Security payroll deductions. But obviously, that's a very good defined benefit. So the system looks at that and says, even with those higher percentage payroll deductions from current employees today, we need to catch up. We're not at full funded. So they send those assessments out to the member communities to catch catch up and get closer to full funding. That's not something that we can go to the county and say, do better, or we don't want to pay it.
Right.
Right. So that's pretty hard. We're looking and seeing if there's super creative things we can maybe do there, but probably unlikely.
Sure.
And when I say super creative, I don't mean like take away people's pensions. That's not what I'm suggesting. But just like what, are there ways that you can accelerate payment and get off those catch-ups? We're looking at those things, but I don't want to mislead the group that there's going to be a solve there.
Appreciate that. Do you mind promoting me as a panelist? Again, I'm ready to go. I don't know if Dottie
Can you promote Tom as a panelist?
does that, or?
Another area is property casualty liability insurances, workers' comp insurances, and insurance across the board, not just health insurance, but property insurance is just exploding for everyone right now. But we are going to market and seeing if there's a way that we could switch carriers, maybe get a better price there. And we do that actually with health benefits as well. As part of, we have an insurance advisory committee that has representations from every town and school union, and the GIC has a kind of 2-year cycle. Don't quote me, it might be 2, might be 3.
I think it's 3 if you want to get out.
And
I haven't gotten an alert to be promoted yet.
You can, as a community, and I don't know what impact bargaining you have to do, so again, I'm not proposing something to our union friends here, but you can leave the GIC and go to a different insurer, right? And the reason we went into the GIC was because they were a substantially better price than the insurance that we were getting. So we were having very similar financial challenges in the wake of the 2008 recession. That was one of the motivators for that. We, as part of doing our due diligence, because we know what a pain point the fixed cost is, how much pressure it puts on the schools, on the towns, we routinely do our loss ratios and check that with other carriers to see, hey, would you quote us and come in and do better? And in my tenure, no one has said yes. And if they did, I would come to the labor group and say, let's have a conversation about this. Because that was a really long way of saying, like, the finance administration, like, we are looking every single year, what are opportunities here to lessen this? On health insurance, we run incentive programs where we offer folks, based on what those GIC rates that are set, which again, we don't negotiate, we'll say, hey, this is the most expensive premium plan. If that's meeting your needs and your family's needs, that's fine. That's your choice, because there's a menu in the GIC. However, if you switch from that plan to a more cost-effective plan, the town will share in the savings with you, right? We'll cut you a bonus check. And sometimes the difference in plans is so substantial that even cutting that bonus, the town still nets a meaningful saving. And in certain years, we've saved more than $100,000, a couple $100,000. Similarly, we have opt-out plans where in Massachusetts you have to provide evidence of health coverage, but depending on what people's situation is with their spouse or their family, they may have access to another plan. Sure. If they show that they're moving on to a different plan that's not here, we will pay them a bonus to leave the insurance pool. And that's not because we don't want to insure our employees or anything. It's because I think, and I hope folks here would appreciate, having spent all this time looking at the budgets, like, things are really tight.
Yeah.
And so we run those every single year.
Appreciate it. Any questions for Connor just about that? And thank you so much for filling the dead space with really valuable info on a huge line item, seriously. So I just want people to see, if you, again, have a $7 million override, look, this just cuts the town and the school as an example by these amounts, so that the town only increases by 5 and the school by 6.2. You can easily do whatever you want. You can make it cut the town by $1 million. Or 10 million?
Okay.
Like, look.
Receivership.
Right? And nothing on the schools. The key is, this is what you need to understand, is that, yes, we'll make it through the current year, and you have a problem in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. With the assumptions we all put in P. So when you do this, like, this is a choose your own adventure. I personally looked at it. So this is what that looks like. So you're good in year 1, and you're underwater in year 2, and by the end of the 4th year, you need to find $5 million, which conveniently is the problem we find ourselves in now. I thought through, again, not a ton of logic, but I said, I don't think it'll be 9, I think it'll be 6. I don't have anything, but I'm just hopeful more than anything that it's not a 10% on top of 10% on top of 10% on top of 10% for 5 years in a row. Regrettably, it could be 15, don't know. But I'm hopeful it's more in line with the historical increases of 6%, and that somehow over the next 4 or 5 years, we find a way to manage cost structure as a society, let alone whatever we can do with our opportunities. But that's huge. I said, look, I know you don't want to start at $1 million, but I just got $1.5 million, so I'm going to be aggressive and go to $1 million. I might even have said I want to go up more in the outer years, but look, you can do whatever you want. This is a choose your own adventure. I said, no, it's not 4%, it's 6% for every single local receipt. Don't know if it's possible, but you might have to increase plumbing inspections from 100 to 400. I don't know, but every dollar I don't ask from local receipts, I ask from a resident. That's how I kind of viewed it. The biggest change is going to 6% on benefits. I didn't feel logical to change much else. I kept 3.5, knowing I'm going to have to look at people and be like, I think that's going to be hard for you.
Yep.
I don't know. You guys are all negotiating your biggest expense line item of salaries. Don't know how that will go. Hope it goes well. Good luck. I'm not in on that. It's not my job. I mean that sincerely. I'll be happy to be done with this by then. So wish you all luck. I hope we teed you up to have a good conversation. But I don't know if 3.5% is a realistic expectation for 5 straight years when we haven't been able to demonstrate that consistently the last 5 years.
Well,
with the
no, I would challenge that, and I think that's really important for the public to understand. Members of this committee have brought up, and Dr. Cabral and I have this conversation all the time. The level of service budget requests that you are seeing from the town and the schools this year and last are anomalies due to a lot of these structural factors due to inflation. From 19 to 24, we were under 3. Not every single year. Some years maybe it was above that, others it wasn't. But there was the normalized average.
You're right. I probably should have clarified. I believe some of the benefit, correct me if I'm wrong, was associated with COVID-related events and fundings. That
there may have been, but
like the ARPA funds, items like that.
So Dr. Cabral can speak to the school operation, but on the town side, to the extent there was programmatic ARPA spending that you could say made the general fund budget increases look better than they were, you're talking a few $100,000.
Okay, fair.
So even if you put that in and normalize that out, you're still looking at probably 3-ish%. We have made that work pre-2024 environment. And by make it work, as we've talked about, it's not like we made it work and we were, improving programs everywhere. But
there were reductions in 21 of 20
something positions, and even last year or the current year in 25, cutting a vacancy in the police department. But I just think it's worth noting that much like there's going to be uncomfortable questions or accusations of, well, if you just didn't pay higher than per capita, or if you just said no to overtime, we wouldn't have an issue here. There will be folks who, especially looking at the preliminary budget, are like, well, I found your problem. Obviously, you can't ask for 5%, you can't ask for 8% fixed. Fair enough. I don't think anyone here is going to say either of those are sustainable numbers multiple years in a row. But it's an incomplete picture to not acknowledge that, there were years where the schools were 2.5. The town was in the 2s. And
I appreciate
that. The average for 19 to 24. And yes, for sure, COVID happened in there and there was cuts. That helped get to that average. We dissolved dispatch in those years. That helped. But the any kind of qualitative thing like that, there's going to be, hopefully not another pandemic. But I would imagine anyone on this group is going to look at it and say, okay, go find more regional opportunities. Go do these things. So it's not impossible to do, and it's not something we haven't done. It's just the current environment has really struggled.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And maybe I should have clarified that. Maybe if I said more accurately, the last 2 years have indicated that 3.5% may potentially be aggressive.
Yep.
But again, if you want, you can make it 2.5. You can make it 1. Just appreciate the policy signal you're sending when you say that, right? If it's nothing, or you want them to retract, you can do that. That's okay. But that's a policy signal you're sending, and that has ramifications after this team finishes its work.
Yeah, so just, I think everybody in the room probably.
So I think everybody in the room
probably knows or appreciates, but I just want to call out that those years of the 2.5% or whatever were not. Oh my God, I'm losing. Leisha, what's reactive in our budget, right? So they were. We did them, right? Because that's what the constraints
Correct.
made us do, but they weren't
We
necessarily
regressed in terms of
either
programs and services being
regressive
provided.
either regressive or reactive, only able to fill very essential needs, and
Sure.
so it has been done, but I wouldn't say any of our years, with the exception of the one COVID year, I think that we got a sudden influx and were able to knock off some proactive things that a little earlier than expected, have been years that we would say met the needs of the district at that level. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay.
So I guess the reason why I wanted to just give you the two models is it shows, to Denise's point, what does sustainable look like. I felt like for me getting to the third or fourth year with a $1.3 million problem in 29, it's enough time to maybe fix that. Maybe things could absolutely get worse next year. Like, so if you change any of the following four assumptions, if you change, where are my notes? If you change insurance, then it moves it up an entire year for when you have a big problem. If you change OPEX from 3.5 to 3.75, it triggers an entire year forward of your problem. If you change local receipts back to 4%, not 6%, it escalates an entire year forward. If you change new growth back to 750, believe it or not, $1 million puts $1 million problem a year earlier. So I'm going to give you this tool, and if you're like, I really don't know how to wrap my head around insurance, call one of us and we'll help you kind of maybe logicalize it, historical increases, what we can expect. Connor can share again the dialogue that he just shared of how hard it is to change it. But the reason why I want to give you this tool is you can choose your own adventure and figure it out. But the numbers don't lie and reinforce everything we've talked about up till now. That there's some things beyond our control, like health insurance, that are killing us for 2 years in a row. And it's really hard to grow our revenues because we're so focused on taxation, property tax. And it comes back to what Chris said a long time ago, and I know slowed us from getting there, but 2.5 is less than 3, Tom. I don't know why we're not just telling people that. I think it's true. That's a very simple way to say the problem we've all been working against. So everything I just showed you includes $7 million overhead. I encourage you to choose your own adventure when you get this file and figure out if you thought that was right, wrong, indifferent, how you would change the dynamic. So Wendy and I wanted to give you this now, so that way as you start to think about giving Nancy, who I'm going to ask to take notes, what the size of the challenge is, what you think it is, how you want to solve it. If it's all revenue, good for you. It's going to be an easier time with you. If it's all expense, we're going to ask you for a recommendation as to how would you allocate that expense reduction between schools and town, and some insight into the logic of that reduction. I, again, would ask that you not specifically pick the individual's name for all the aforementioned reasons before of a reduction for legal implications and considerations. But if you want to say, look, I think it should be the schools, I think because when I looked at the comparable data, I felt like it was okay that we were second from the bottom. I'm okay being at the bottom. Fine, that's a mathematical, logical statement that you can make, and the impact of that is $2 or $3 million, and thank you. Or the town has Tom Broussard FP&A department, and I don't think other towns have that. We should not have that, and that is worth $1 million. And that's my, again, I wouldn't use the name, but like we have this glaring department. So I just ask you, you can't just say, I think we should cut our way out of it. Great, thank you so much. Good luck with that. Figure it out. We need your insight to give us a little bit of color and detail so that we can package it as if it becomes the final recommendation, how we will go to the residents of our community to say, our team recommended a reduction of $7 million, allocated X, Y, Z to this and that. And obviously we'll make a recommendation, but if it is just straight reduction, Connor and Leisha will go back to the drawing board and figure out what that recommendation looks like for their respective institutions. present it to their committees and boards, and it will follow the normal budget path. So does that kind of make sense for what we're trying to accomplish with this next go-around? I'm excited for it, and I mean that sincerely. Like I know that this might be a long and difficult meeting, but it's actually the culmination of all the effort you all put in, so I'm appreciative of it.
So the ask is, I can put this out in writing, people kind of like that when they have a format to reply to, and then folks will reply to this before our next meeting?
Yeah.
Or do you want to start talking about that?
No, we have to have answers now.
Okay.
We asked them to do homework to give us
Okay.
answers now.
Very good.
I'll go first. I think that it should be all override. I think for the model that I built with the logical assumptions that I put in, I'm on a risk profile that I still believe will be challenging for us to generate a 5-year runway. I'm concerned that insurance won't be 6%, it will be higher. I think that we do not provide the resources in terms of staffing and expense levels that are comparable to other communities. And I'm concerned that if we solved this with a larger expense reduction than is modeled, that it might negatively impact the programs and services to the point that it negatively impacts our community and our home values over the long term. I have my model. I literally walked through my logic so that I could feel thoughtful about that increase. I think that, it might make sense for us to have more than one answer at the end of the day. Like if we all decide it's a revenue side solution, we may want to say, here's what the full solution looks like, and that's 8 million. And here's what, and that gets us this, like whatever that is. It creates level services this year. It preserves existing staffing levels. Whatever we all decide we get for that, that can't be me answering that, but we have to say what that gets you when we pitch it. And I'm hopeful it gets that, and I'm going to tell everybody, by the way, we didn't get you 5 years. I think you're going to come back and have this discussion in the 4th year, most likely, or 5th year, and it just makes pure mathematical sense that if it's 2.5 isn't 3, eventually you're going to have this discussion. I could keep going. I have a whole boatload of logical reasons as to why I feel the way I do that go all the way back to 2017 with the first operational override that govern why I joined the select board and the budget subcommittee and why I promulgated back then an override that would have, at the time, ranged from 4 to 5 million. That's all public knowledge. You can go back and look at some really awesome budget subcommittee meetings for yourself. So I really have tried to do the best I can, knowing that that was out there, to make sure we as a committee understood that there are an equation. And I respect that it might be expense side solution for other people. But by the model I just did, am asking for a solution of about 2 million from where we're at for a current budget. I know that I just received in the mail, like you all did as town residents, that there has been a cut in the local office for receipts, and you can no longer come by at any time you want to pay your bill because we are already reducing headcount. We have, do you mind if I say this? We have already retracted positions that were out there that people applied for and sent them an I'm sorry email, but we, due to budget cuts, will not be hiring for this position. So we're doing cuts all the time, I believe. That was cavalier. I believe that the stewards of our budgets are thoughtfully not spending money wherever they can. That's what I believe. So I don't want this town in 5 years to go back because we weren't able to support them with the funding necessary to solve the next 5 years, preferably 10. I think I have a whole boatload of caveats if we go the revenue side of I want us to talk about new growth, I want us to talk about zoning, I want us to talk about what our constraints will be that we commit to for the residents of, like, we promise not to have a debt exclusion override for X number of years or something else, or there's a whole boatload of things. I think I sent it to Denise, but like if you Google memorandum of understanding around operational override, you'll have Hingham pop up, Attleboro pop up, Franklin pop up. These are not new principles. Like there are thousands of options for you to self-limit what your override will do and how long it will last. I think that's a huge conversation if we go to the revenue side. I only used all my words there because I wanted you all to feel comfortable for like however you look at it is not bad or good. Just hopefully that helps how I got there. Who's really excited and pumped to go next?
I'll go.
Sweet.
Okay. I proposed a $8 million override. And then I just came up with, so obviously that was my solution, but some short-term, possibly, and I don't know if it's a thing, but people that are on the cusp of retiring, maybe a buyout of some sort, especially if we're not going to replace that position right now. Reassess all the fees in town, correct any and all fees that are not in line with surrounding comm communities, i.e. permits, licenses, etc. Easton does not have to have the lowest fees in the area.
Right.
You know, I think it's fair to be on par with some of the other ones. I know Board of Health is considering adjusting. One I'm very passionate about, which is, I have been since this committee started, which is reducing the wetlands rules to that of the state minimum requirements in an effort to encourage building a new growth to the town. Piggybacking on that, possibly establishing a new growth committee to discuss and find ways to encourage new growth ongoing, and possibly increasing the incentive for town employees to forego their health insurance.
Gotcha.
Or go what?
Forego health
Health insurance.
Which they are doing now.
Opt out.
Yeah. Like
So we
their
have an
spouse-
incentive
yeah.
to switch to a lower plan.
Yes, and you have an
And
incentive
to opt out.
and a separate incentive to leave if you can provide proof of other insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's already happening now.
Yes, but I think Chris had make it
Increase the
offer an
incentive.
increased incentive.
Increase the incentive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Um,
Anybody else?
You can
Go for it.
So fundamentally, I believe personally that an override is what's necessary, but the pragmatic side of me and the realistic side of me is urging me to plan for the worst. And so I think as a thought exercise and an experiment, because Nancy and I were privileged to meet with faculty today at the high school who were interested in learning more about the budget process, many had kind of articulated that in previous meetings how we'd even said it's beneficial to know just how bad it could get, and the open house articulated a little bit of this, but not to the doom and gloom, and that's a poor use of words because we don't want to scare people, but I think we're at the place where we need to start doing that. I think it would be a beneficial thought exercise to plan for the inevitable worst or potential worst that an override won't pass and what that looks like for the town. And in that case, then we can sufficiently say to people when they ask what is it going to look like, we have everything outlined out, and so we plan for the worst and we hope for the best. So I would ideally love an override, but I think realistically we need to go through the painful process of thinking about what would have to be cut.
They will. So the good news is that right now a budget is being formulated that indicates what would have to be cut. That's the normal process.
But like
So-
down to like, we need to balance it, 6 million cut, go.
Yeah. So part of the 6 million, that's what I'm asking you for. So the size of the problem is, like, I think that right now they have told us that the budget difference is, I think the latest update is
6.36 million.
So they're telling you that they have to find 6.36 million. That's the problem. We may have opinions about that. And so the floor may be in that line of thinking, well, all right, if it's 6.3 million and they're going to tell you how they're going to get there. Not today. They've accelerated their processes just to even begin that dialogue at this early. But like, we are trying to give a posture of, so you're going to see that. That will be a budget presentation. They have to. They have to give a balanced budget because they don't know if they're going to get additional funds. So you'll get a cut of that. So yes, thought exercise going on. That's the normal process they have to go through, and they're leading that right now. So in your mind, do you agree with that? And therefore the problem in your mind is 6.3 million.
I mean, I think given what we just saw, that it's just going to put us in a similar boat in a couple of years. I think Chris's point of a little bit higher would help it, but I'm struggling to foresee how taxpayers are going to stomach such a thing.
So if I could make it easier for you guys, separate out the consequence. Just come up with what you believe, share it, so that hopefully we have done a great job. When we get there and people are like, I can't, but what are you doing? We're like, well, we just invested 5 months to educate you as to why we're here. You can disagree with that. That's okay. You can all choose that we just want to solve it by an expense reduction. That's budget A. They've done that. They did their job. So, all right. However, if you listen to us, you'll know we are incredibly lean. We're nervous about it negatively impacting programs and services and value to our community. And like, we could all individually, we don't have to, but insert the passionate things that are important to us that I hope you keep. And the reality is that you're probably thinking of things that we won't. Like, there are some things that Easton has that other communities don't, that I know personally that I am so grateful we have it on a family impact level, that I would expect somebody is going to say, nobody else has that, it should go. And I'll be like, that person helped out my daughter like you wouldn't believe. But I'm not going to go there, right? Like, I get it. That's just my emotional, personal subject. So I guess where I'm going with it is, if you're 6.3 million, but you believe, to Chris's logic, that we need more of a run rate because we have some more structural issues to solve, then you're north of 6.3.
Yes.
You can pick whatever number that is. We just need it. And then I would ask, in ideal world, don't think about consequences of what you have to do. What's your recommendation to solve it?
Tom, with all due respect, I think it's very difficult to think about this in this enclosed vacuum without having some realistic expectation of what our consequence is going to be and what the reaction will be.
Could I?
So while I know that
Please.
I know that we're charged with coming up with a number, but and I can do that, but I just want to tell you that it doesn't come without some deliberate thought about.
I'm just going to make one point.
Yeah.
I agree. That's why we did things like the last time we had a problem, we cut 27 people for 2.6 million. You can make a logical inference that for every $3 million of problem, you're talking roughly 30 people, ish. Again, nobody is going to be right with what we do. As soon as you say the number, it's wrong. I'm just letting you know, like, something's going to change in your budget, your forecast. So where I'm going with it is, we have thoughtfully, Denise, asked, just to try to give you seeds, and I just want to make sure everybody understands it, that the size, when I say the size of the problem is 40 to 80 people, that's truth. Like, I believe that. Like, I think if 27 people equal 2.7 million, and I have a $7 to $8 million problem, and we've been saying all along that the size of the problem, this isn't about $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 problem. This is so large, and the only place you can get a solution largely is people. If you solve it by people, you actually have to over-index because of the way our unemployment compensation works. So it's not just, 30 times an average of 75 grand. It's kind of like 40 times an average of 75 grand, because you have to give them 13 weeks of unemployment that you owe them to pay. That's why we had that part of the conversation. So, like, if you want to know the impact and you want to solve it by the expense side, we purposefully and logically have brought you all, and you all agreed, that salary is the #1 most likely place to be reduced. The average salary is X. You're looking to save 8 million. That's where you get somewhere between 40 to 60 or 50 to 80 people, depending upon the size of your problem.
Tom, could I just
Please.
ask for, and Denise as well, I don't think what's being suggested is, don't be concerned that we don't have to be concerned with the consequence. I think it's at this very first pass of, what do you think the size of that problem is? That's a different thing than, and where would you ultimately land, and where do we think we land as a committee, right?
Correct.
And so, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong here, if it's, well, we've looked at this for 6 months, and I think it's 8, but I'm worried about the financial impact on individuals and political viability, which is super legitimate.
Agreed.
So I think you can't ask for anything more than 4, okay, but then Tom's next question would be, where's the 4 million of cuts coming from?
Correct. If you think the problem's 8, and your hybrid solution is 4 from the residents and 4 from the expense reduction, my next question is, well, okay, so you netted to 4. All right, we have a $4 million problem in your eyes. Help me understand where that reduction is going to be allocated. Is it 50-50, 75-20? Did you find in all the information we gave, all the information we gave, were you like, well, we were closest to staffing levels in this department, so if any place, maybe we look there. That's a logical argument, can't refute it. Nobody's right or wrong. Or look, I feel like we have so much liability that I was watching a TV show on call, and a police officer went to a call, and that Long Beach, California, was having a budget crisis. One person went, and because they couldn't afford 2 patrol people in a car, that one person went on their own. They got shot and died. And I was like, oh my God, like how do I try to, as a human, like, are we giving our police department the right resources so that I'm not jeopardizing them and putting them at risk for what's right, comparable to other communities? Because I just saw this real world example of what happens when you have budget cuts and you go from 2 people in a car to 1. Now, that was drama. It was made up. But like, I'm thinking those things, like, if I'm a police officer, if I'm the teacher, or if I'm the fire person, and I don't know. I'm hopeful Chris tells us, but like, I appreciate when they say, look, you have to have 2 vehicles go to a call, because like, that's fundamental. Like, you can't enter a house until the second set of people, I'm making, if I'm wrong, obviously, but you can't enter a house until second people get there. But God, if I cut the fire department, and that means that somebody has to come from the other station, and they're out,
Or
like,
from Mansfield.
or Mansfield,
Right.
like, we're gonna sit and watch somebody's house burn, and we might not be able to, like, so I'm not using isolated incidents to conflate, I don't know, you know what I'm saying, to inflate the concern, but like, I'm thinking those things. I really am. Like, if there's a teacher impact, and education is so important to our community, we've stood by it, so forth, I believe in it, I think it helps financially and economically, then I don't know, like, what would happen, how we would provide programs and services that our community values deeply. So that's, you hit the nail on the head. So please.
When it's going around and people are talking about override, I've heard it several times tonight, is there a timeline in people's minds when they're saying that?
So I'm assuming when we go to town meeting, from a calendar, because I'm assuming you're kind of along the same
This
lines.
town meeting in May?
In May. Like,
Okay.
we are tasked with coming to the town meeting in May with a recommendation to solve sustainability.
Okay, so to be clear,
Yes.
and this is not new information, been sharing it all along, but I think maybe now that it's in context, people may be able to understand it a little bit better. That will not eliminate 40-plus layoffs in September. Because on a school department schedule, we advertise for positions in February, usually after February vacation. April vacation's considered too late. So our hiring period is between February and April. So to be very clear, this is not an exercise of, to Marissa's point, plan for the worst, hope for the best. I'm not planning on any hope, because the
Regardless
worst
of
is
what
on,
happens is
the
happening.
worst is on paper right there, and we're charged right now with cutting $6.3 million.
Yeah.
And so if we are contractually responsible, and in my opinion, ethically and morally responsible for letting people know about cuts in April, the latest, because that's the end of the hiring season, and people need to be able to get a job elsewhere. There's no scenario where the end of May, when town meeting is, we haven't already laid off 40, 50, 60 people. So that's happening. That is happening. Based on the numbers we got from Connor, that's happening right now. That's happening. We have to figure out where that is, what it is, who it is. So a town meeting in May, just to be really clear, if an override went through at the end of May, those people have already been laid off. So maybe we can have people come back, maybe we won't, maybe we can fill the holes of that many people, but that's our current reality. The budget is right, sheet that Connor created is right in front of us. Right now, our charge is cut $6.3 million. That's 3-ish, maybe up to 4 million for the school department. So that's what we have just been charged to do. The timeline maybe for police, fire, DPW, town, maybe those employees can wait until May or June to find out if we get an override and it doesn't impact them. That's way beyond our timeline in the school department. So I just want to be clear that if people are saying, I would really love to avoid an impact on services, so I'm going to say tonight, I think we should have an override in May and leave feeling like there is hope, that's not going to fix our problem next year.
So appreciate the clarity. It has happened at an unfortunate time, meaning if it happened 6 months ago, potentially we could have escalated and increased our engagement. Incorrectly, when we asked if we were able to give indication, and that's why we accelerated our engagement to an answer tonight and started meeting every 2 weeks. Would that be helpful? It seemed like it would. I think we have to reconsider if there's any way possible, and I appreciate you're going to tell me no, but I'm just not going to accept it now, probably just because I'm personally frustrated that we're trying to work and have been trying to work to not have that happen this entire process. So to find out now on January 29th that no matter what we do, there's a negative impact on people is unfortunate at best.
Well,
So
I've been saying this for
I
several
don't-
years, and I'm saying it again now, and I say it all the time. I just got the numbers from Connor to be able to estimate people, so I could never say that much.
Dr. Cabral, I think we all knew that we largely had a pretty material problem. We know that
That's
at
what I'm
least
saying.
It was $5 million a month and a half ago. So
No, I know that, but I also didn't know what GIC is going to come in at. I didn't know what
yep.
receipts would come in at. I don't know any of that. We don't have that information. That only comes from Connor's office.
Okay.
So he has to put that information together.
So what I'm going to do, just to keep our particular meeting going forward now, is ask you to put a pin in that. Because I
Okay.
still need to get from people the size of the problem.
That's fine.
I still need to communicate to the residents of our community
Okay.
what the long-term solve is. It's regrettable in your organization that the long-term solve might be a dip in pain right now that then gets fixed and you solve next year in a different way to get back to providing the program services with the staffing levels the residents
Well,
of our
that's why I'm
community
looking at the chart saying, well, then it's only, then with the formula you came up with, it's 2 more years maybe in the positive, and then it's in the negative. In the negative for the school department, we're rebuilding for the next 7, 8 years.
Right. I don't know how you're rebuilding if we get you back to the budget support level with an incremental amount of millions of dollars. What you're really explaining to me, what I heard, is you're going to organizationally experience pain because you have a unique calendar that's applicable only to your organization that will cause you to dip by whatever, 40 teachers using your number. And then the town and residents will vote to support you to fund back those 40 people. And regrettably for you, because of the timing of how this entire process unfolded, you may hire back the same 40 or get 40 brand new people. And that's going to happen in your calendar because of the timing.
Right, but just to be clear, the end of May, most people who are going to get a job have a job somewhere else.
Look-
And to fill that hole, it's
I get it.
going to result
That's
in
on-
the
look,
lack
if
of
we get
services
you-
that we had. See, at PASE, we had posters on this at the open house. So there's a poster that said, next year, we're going to be regressive, and these are the things we're going to lose. And they were all listed there. So we've been having this
I
conversation.
think the lack of clarity is that we were hopeful if we were able to assume that more resources would be available, that next year would be a different picture. We assumed, potentially that you were presenting steady state. If I have to cut 6.3 for collectively as a team, this is what it would look like. What I didn't appreciate is that some period of time ago, whenever, that if we knew there was going to be cuts, no matter what happened to you because of the timing of your calendar, there would be no way to preserve the number of people in your organization.
Well,
They'll get
I don't,
back there in the
but I
following
don't
year.
know, I also don't know, Tom, how overrides work on a timeline. I don't know if this committee was even going to recommend an override. I don't know if overrides happen. Can there be an override vote in March or April, or were you planning on May? Nobody ever said when they were thinking of an override, which is why I asked the question.
Sure. No, I think we were always, go ahead, Dottie.
I just was gonna say, knowing that, what would you recommend? Like, where are we with that? Is there any way to solve that, or?
No. I mean, the only quick fix is an override, but if you're saying you're planning for an override at the end of May, that is too late for our timeline.
We know we were presenting to the select board at the end of March. We knew we were presenting at May what the recommendations of our committee were. And so what we're just learning is that potentially we spoke past each other in terms of, like, I knew the timeline of the presentation for our recommendation. We've targeted March for a deliverable since we started. It was one of the first things we talked about. And so the only thing in hindsight we might have done was escalated and tried to resolve this and started sooner so that there was potentially an override discussion well before town meeting. But I would envision at town meeting that we would have one budget, which is based upon no incremental support, and that's going to be a reduction of 6.3 million. That's the floor. And then there would be a budget presentation to the residents of our community that say, and I'm going to remove timing. So the goal is, if we wanted level service, I apologize that regrettably in your organization it might dip for a year, but you would be funded to get back those people through the override as quickly as you could get them.
Right, but I just need to provide context.
I understand.
When a school department eliminates that many people, people do not apply there for several years. That's why we say it typically takes 8 years to get
Unless
back
the residents of
on
the
track.
community just voted to directly allocate, which an override does, and say $5 million will be allocated to the schools, making this up. And therefore, those positions are funded. If that doesn't do anything to sway the argument of somebody applying for a position, to me, that's a community that has supported what you're trying to build.
Can I ask a point of reference? We go to the town meeting to balance the budget or whatever. If we challenge with an override, we then need to go to a vote, don't we? A townwide vote?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the PASE's calendar has been in the charge since last year. Part of that was backed out from our town meeting is set by charter. The annual town meeting is the third Monday in May. That does not mean the select board couldn't call a special town meeting earlier, but that is when town meeting is. And yes, that's when the budget for the coming year is proposed by myself and adopted by voters. There are a variety of ways that a community can approach a potential override budget, right? And one of the things, and we heard it at this committee, that I think folks have tried to be very sensitive to and diplomatic about is that we did not want to get over, I'll speak for myself, I didn't want to get over my skis and come in Labor Day and say, here's an override calendar, right? By the way, I'm open to other ideas, but here's a calendar for the next 9 months, including multiple elections. But, and we'll get a confirmation from the clerk, but the select board is the body responsible for calling for an override ballot. So overrides take two things electorally. They take the legislature, in our case town meeting, adopting a budget that funds programs and departments based on that new revenue, and it takes a ballot vote by voters saying we authorize that increased revenue above 2.5. The order that happens is not set in stone. It could be either or. You can have a ballot before a town meeting or after. But even within there is nuance that you could, and the town has. So what we have done with building projects like Blanche Ames or the public safety buildings is lay out and say, okay, well, we're going down this path. We're going to call, because you have that 35-day window, that long lead time, we're going to call for an election on a date certain, and between us calling for that election and the ballot, we can hold a town meeting, right? So, or you can, in the case of PASE, which is a committee that got created out of town meeting and said we're going to come back next town meeting, you could take the opinion, and obviously PASE is going to want to talk about it of, well, PACE could recommend a contingent budget that would go before town meeting. And if that passes, then the board could call for an election to effectuate it. And that puts you at the end of June. Alternatively, you could, if PACE has a recommendation in March, and then when I say you, this would be up to the board and the school committee, and the runway gets kind of impossibly tight because what Tom has said, I personally agree with, is that you can't kind of just go and say, yeah, we're just doing this and we'll work the details out later, right? As far as what are we doing for multiple years in the future? Are there budget control issues? Are there revenue share formulas we agree on? So people can plan on some amount of stability from the community, from the town, and the schools. You could have a ballot called for in advance of town meeting, but it has to be the ballot language has to be exact. So that's a really important point. So you need to know what you're asking for in full detail before you craft the language that says, shall the town of Easton be able to exempt from Proposition 2.5?
I think everyone can, we can dismiss that thought process right now. We're just like, to get before the public and to sell our story,
to be clear, I'm not advocating for that. I'm trying to give a technical answer to your question.
Right.
That there's a variety of ways you can do it. PACE's charge that everyone had, we've all had for 9 months. Somebody can make an argument it would be inconsistent with that to just say, well, we're just going to get it on the books. Someone can say, well, no, we have timing considerations that are sensitive, so we want to get it on the books. TBD as far as where PACE lands. Yep. But there are some statutory realities that we would need to get to, which is that the select board, even if they were willing to, and Dottie and I can't speak for them, prospectively call for one early to stay ahead of contractual obligations. The language of that ballot would need to be known. And the language also includes the number and for what departments.
When would you need to have an answer for changing your viewpoint? In other words, if an override got approved today, is it already too late?
No.
When?
As soon as I announce
When?
reductions.
When? Ish. Like, I'm okay with mid-April. I'm okay with mid-February, mid-March. Because if you're like, look, it's next week,
It can't be
Tom.
less than April. It can't be later than April.
Okay. So later than April. I'm not advocating, Denise, sorry. Just should have opened with that. Let's just pick April 15th for the middle. So we'll take away, if that's okay for the committee, literally the mathematical calculation of days. And if it requires a sprint of everybody will go knock on doors for 23 straight days so that we can touch 15,000 people, Denise, that's option. You guys want to do it? Or, regrettably, there may be a consequence on the school side that I think nobody here is intending to have happen. So far, from the people that have spoken. Please?
So, and not to take us backwards, but to be fair, Connor and I have been talking about this for a decade, saying that it was coming.
Yeah.
And we said it was going to be next year. And I was speaking publicly at a recorded meeting, a hearing for the school committee, and actually more passionately than I usually speak, was trying to plead with people to understand the scope of the problem, that it was millions of dollars, to the point that I was misquoted as saying 100,000 was a drop in the bucket, because I was saying passionately, you're focusing on an amount of money that's not going to solve this problem. This problem is huge, and it's millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. This is not new news.
Agreed.
And we talked about a 1.8 deficit before we even start the school year because of all of the funding from ARPA. So a $2 million deficit, then you add $2 million just in the insurance, that's $3 million for schools right off the bat. So I apologize that you didn't hear it that way, but we've been saying this for an awful long time and actually using numbers for it as well.
I'm with you. You know, since 2016, I've been putting numbers to this. I'm with you. The part that I didn't hear, and I won't speak for others, is that, Tom, your time to get me a solution is February or was it mid-April? April 15th.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because this is the
So-
first, this is the night people have been talking about
Right.
override, and I didn't know what your timeline for override was, and you just said May.
Why I'm saying we talked past each other. So in my mind, I've been crystal clear for the entire time this charge was put forth that we're presenting in March for a May town meeting. So I understand how we missed each other. My only frustration is that we are deeply aligned that we don't want any reduction to happen. I personally did not know I had to get you an answer by April 15th. I would have changed my engagement level and said, this is not a problem. I just would have done things differently so that by April 15th you had your answer. Because my goal and objective is not to negatively impact people and staffing unless that is the will of the residents. And we have to find a way to get at the will of the residents, which in this case could have been asking them in March 30th to come to our special town meeting for this override discussion. And we hope we've done a good job preparing you for it. And by the way,
We do every year vote on our budget in April, the school committee and the select board. So-
understood.
Okay.
Understood. What we're just learning, so we're on the same page. I know the problem has existed for all this time. Like you, feel like I'm in the wilderness, nobody's hearing me, and I'm just shouting out for long years. The challenge is just the timing. And now all we're doing is digesting what you said. We are trying to solution live of how can we potentially not impact negatively people, and what would that look like? And that's a conversation for afterwards. That's a select board conversation. That's Nancy and I probably have to strategize how could we communicate to X number of people to be successful. We don't want to go to market with a less than fully baked to Connors.
I'm sitting here thinking, other towns, what have they chosen a couple of these different routes, how they've been successful with overrides, how did that impact their time? And those are the kind of things we'll try to look at off.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't change, this is a year zero problem. What I mean by that is we hypothetically, we all get an approval if we went that route. Funding exists for the schools that is permanently baked into an operating budget because we believe we are understaffed. So that in the following year, as soon as you get the green light, I'm hoping you're looking for people to get back to the right staffing levels that we all agree and everybody else agrees and you build. But we are, if you have 800 people, and now I'll use me, I want to give you the money to keep 800 people. I don't want you to lose people. In an ideal world, I'd want you to get more because I feel like we understaff compared to surrounding communities and dark communities. So the fact that we're going to go from 800 to 740, regrettably because of timing, then back to 800 2 months later with funding, it's just regrettable. You won't be able to hire all those people. But make no bones about it, Dr. Cabral. When you get an override, we will be telling the residents exactly where that money is going departmentally. Like, it's not a general bucket. That's the one chance the residents of our
I
community.
hear you. I just want you to know that after 35 years in this business, the nature of this business is you don't just get the money back and everybody comes back and you're at square zero.
I know. Yeah, that's the unfortunate part.
It just doesn't-
I'm sorry,
doesn't
I'm not
happen.
asking you to
Okay.
commit to saying in April we'll have all the people back. No. What I'm telling you is, from my perspective as a member of this committee, I did my job to try to get you resources so that you can leverage that for not just this year, but the next 5 to 10 years. Because in aggregate, that $4 million over 10 years, compounded at a 2.5% increase, gets you $50 million to spend over 10 years. That's where I'm at. The fact that you regrettably will have this blip for this particular year, I deeply regret that I didn't.
I just want everyone in the world to know it's not going to be a one-year blip.
All right.
I need everybody to understand that.
Got it. And as a
Okay.
resident, I'll come to you and go to every meeting and say, please do the best you can to get the people that you can that we funded, because I really believe passionately in the effort and contributions that your team makes.
And of course, we would do that without even you asking.
That's all I
But
ask.
I'm just telling you how it works.
I got
how
it.
it's happened the last few years with all the overrides for my colleagues. They're still
Got
having
it.
trouble getting people and so on.
Fine. And if you said, so I appreciate that you have laid the problem. We're aware of it. Like, we understand it visibly now. I would ask you if there's a way that you can accelerate it, because we've created this blip and you're like, look, if I had an extra, making this up, so please take that, we all know this is a no. But if I could market for positions with an extra $500,000, I would get them back faster. let us know that. Maybe that should be factored into this discussion of 8 million, because we have unwittingly created this problem as a committee. Unfortunately, nobody here, I don't think, has the intent that we are now have to resolve this by April 15th, and it may result in people losing their positions. That was never my goal. I don't know if anybody else, like, that's fair. Right. So now the goal is afterwards, let's take away, because I need to get back to what people are recommending to understand the size of the problem. And we can solution that after the fact to try to figure out if we as a committee can support you in that particular issue. Because we know you face it. It's hard.
We are not the only community in Massachusetts facing this. This isn't just Easton. There are going to be other communities that are going to be facing this. There are other communities that have a 10% increase or a 17% increase in their health and so forth. And I'm hoping that we can preserve, something here that, if we can put
Sure.
Easton on track, that.
Well said. So I'm just gonna, it's 9:37, so I'm thoughtful. Could we just kind of go pretty quickly of what people think is the size of the problem and how they would solve it? If it's a hybrid, just give me the net. Like, I think we have a $9 million problem. I recommend a $4 million expense reduction. So we have a $5 million problem that we're gonna use revenue. So Marissa, you started all this. No pressure. But like, to your point, do we have an $8 million problem? And do you think the ultimate solution should be 8 or something less than 8?
Not very good with numbers as an English teacher. So I'm going to say it's an $8 million problem, but reductions would need to be made in order to, in good conscience, ask our taxpayers.
So what's the net? How much reduction?
More predominantly at the school level, unfortunately, because we make up more of the budget. And I leave it up to those that are in charge to make such a decision.
What a dollar amount? Like, do you want to 2 million, so the net is 6, 4 million, so the net is 4. That gives guidance as to the depth of the reduction.
2 million.
Okay, so net is 6, 8 and 2, and there's a lean towards preserving some allocation towards schools. Is that a fair summary of your position?
Yes.
Cool. Kathy?
So I was initially thinking around 8, and kind of doing split down the middle with it. It's a tough ask because I think the override is a Band-Aid to a bigger issue that's going to help for a day and not sustain. So I think it helps us get us through one hoop, but not longevity-wise. I think we really have to look at like that revenue side and how do we cultivate that? How do we get the business in here? Because we look at what other districts or towns and everything, what they're able to pull in and how that offsets for their community members. And I know we have been historically the small town, but it's changed. So now how can we evolve with that? So that's what I think we need to have like a clearer picture as to what that could what that feasibility looks like going forward.
So you can do what I did, which is say, I'm just going to assume demand that the organization has to contribute at least $1 million in new growth. For context, you could say, I believe Easton should add, I'm not saying, I could say, I believe Easton should add 3 more Avalons, and that generates $3 more million of new growth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not advocating for that,
No.
residents.
No.
That's what you're saying.
Right. No,
You could
like,
say, I want a Gillette Stadium.
I think we need like more business at least to offset it. I think also, I liked Chris's idea with looking at that reserve plan. What can we do? Is that even feasible to do? And looking at the fees and making that more comparable. Not that that's necessarily going to throw everything over the edge and we're going to be just rolling in the money then, but at least it's something moving in the right direction.
So you, if I could, you're at 8 million.
Yeah.
You initially were going to say 4 and 4.
Yeah.
What are you saying now? Marissa's at 6 and 2. It's not Price is Right. You can go over or under.
I don't know. I think it's also difficult because we're also like that everybody's taxes are going to go up, and what are they going to see as a result of that, right? Like,
I'm asking your help, Kathy. I'm going to be on May standing up in front of probably 6,000 people trying to advocate for wherever we net on total. So I know that this is uncomfortable, but please know I'll be thinking of you
I'm
in
going
May.
to say 4 and 4.
4 and 4, okay.
Yeah.
And of the 4 million of the expense reduction, would you split it 50-50? Would you focus anywhere? Would it all be schools? Would it all be town? Give us some insight so that we can give direction.
I think it's like hearing from the town and how they have not hired over the last few years. It makes it hard for me to say that that's where like the lion's share should come from, because they haven't hired the lieutenants, they haven't hired more firefighters, they've been doing all of that all along. So
They've increased their staffing over the last 3 years. Just not, they have.
Okay.
That's the sheet we provided at the last meeting that shows in every budget book where all the positions have changed. It's in every one, so you can go and do that.
okay, maybe
So-
I missed that.
That's okay, but look, it's rateable.
Okay.
They're not, they didn't, and 4 years ago, they cut 26 positions. So you can logicalize this in any way, take all your data in. But it sounds like you're saying with a lean towards the school side.
Now I don't know. Now I'm back to 50-50.
Okay, we'll come back to you. But
Okay.
please appreciate why I'm not pushing to be mean. I'm pushing because in May, I'm going to be representing, and with Nancy, all of us. And we're going to go to market after we get this. If we net at override, you're going to get some good engagement. This is that moment Chris wanted like 2-3 meetings ago that I wish we could have done then. But yeah, people are going to engage. They're going to be like, yeah, I heard this is blah, 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 blah. And our job really starts to educate. So we'll come back to you.
All right.
But 4 and 4. Andrea?
I think my rationale is looking at the deficit along with what's coming out of free cash. So that's how I'm getting to the $8 million amount. I'm 7 something, I believe, overall. So I'm just rounding up to 8. As far as the split, I guess, so net would be 4 overall. And I believe a hybrid option, expense reduction and the revenue, of course. I'm a little hesitant to say hybrid because I feel like it would be really hard in just 1 year to try to realize the revenue.
So 4 and 4. And if you're reducing $4 million of expense, how would you do that?
I would make sure we're sitting down between town and schools and literally going line by line for what they're proposing for their reductions to make sure they still have what they're considering essential programming, maybe going through a similar exercise like we do with the school department of what they consider as strategic, or when they're in the regressive stage, what that looks like, and just working together what that split would actually be.
Would love to do that, but regrettably, Andrea, you do not have the time.
I know.
So
I know.
what I'm going to ask you is, based upon all the information that you have received, how we have staffed, how we are situated, where do you think reductions or focus should be in terms of school, town? Should it be rateable? What is the rate? Should it be, again, this is a high level. Like, and look, if you're like, look, I'm largely middle of the road, say that. But if somebody may have a very strong opinion that it shouldn't be the town, or it shouldn't be the schools, or it should be the town, or it should be the schools. That's what we're trying to get at.
Okay. I'm in the middle of the road right now, so I'd say
Okay.
half and half.
It's fine. Chris?
Yes. It's interesting, the first time we went through, everybody was guessing on the percentage over. I think I was the only one that said 8%.
8 million.
I feel vindicated.
Correct. I would give you an orange
But
shirt,
also,
we can't do that.
Connor put in here my position that I have to come from is the discussion about the senior on a fixed income. So if you're talking about 8% override, you're talking about possibly 10% of my income.
So 8 million override?
That's what I meant, 8 million.
Yep.
8 million override.
So it's $880.
It would be, let's say 5 to 10% of my income.
Sure.
And of course, I'm feeling all of the same pressures that everybody else is feeling. And that's, even if the house doesn't increase in value, which makes the taxes even higher.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to look at it from that point of view. And I think that this problem has to be equally shared. I see that the residents and also the employees of the town, because they are also a part of the town, are part of the covenant of the town themselves. And so they should also share in the bitter herbs that we're going to have to bite here. Now, I did go through 2.5. I worked in a school system during 2.5, and I remember what that chaos was like when education didn't happen because the teachers stood out in the hallways talking about, oh, what's going to happen, who's going to, and so on and so forth. And actually, it was either 2011 or 2012, the school system was in complete disarray, and they were short money, and so they actually furloughed everybody in the school system for 3 days. And so I gave, out of my income, about $1,500 to the school system for that particular year. And so I think there are ways that can be shared that the people working for the town and the people and the town peoples themselves can share in what we're going to have to do to get through this chaos. It's going to be 3 to 5 years. Now, how you would break it out for those, so if I were to say 4 and 4, just like everybody else, how we would break it out, well, the town is like 30%, and the school system is the school system is 85% of the budget, right? And the town,
No.
85.
The range is either 50-50 of operating,
No. What I
but
meant
if
is
you
85% of the school's budget goes towards
Yes. Salaries.
employees. And so it should be broken up ratio of town versus school, depending on how much they take from the total budget.
Okay, so maintain the existing ratio
Yeah.
of staffing reduction. Okay.
Well, can I ask for clarification? And I mean, there's no way that's not going to sound like I'm advocating for one side or the other. But when someone says even split, are you saying so 2 million cut to the town and school? Because 2 million cut to the town is 10% of the town budget.
No, I think what he was saying is if 85% and 85% exist and the schools have 800 people and the town has 200 people, then the reduction would be commensurate of reducing 800 by 25% and
But, so then
200 by
are you talking
25%.
FTEs at that point or salary? 'Cause
No,
they're not
I'm
the same
just talking
thing.
about how much the expense, how much of the $100 million for the town budget, how much is the percentage that is the town side salaries?
21% is town operations, 50%
And then
is
the same
school,
thing
then
for the
remainder is
schools.
fixed. No.
And so you would do the cut based on that ratio.
The weighted
So when
average.
someone, I'm sorry, when someone, like Andrea said, 50-50, do you also mean according to the current ratios or literally 2 million, 2 million? I think that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, that's
sorry.
a,
Yeah.
The 50-50 was in regards to an $8 million problem.
Right.
4 million would be revenue, 4 million would be
And that
expense.
4 million's
On the
broken-
expense side, so far, we've heard heavy weight towards schools. And I think what Chris is articulating is it should be commensurate with the existing ratio.
yeah, I know, I've
So
seen
if
at
it's-
least 2 people said 50.
50-50 on splitting the expense side, so that's what I'm trying to
Oh,
clarify.
I didn't hear that. I heard 50-50 on splitting the $8 million problem.
They-
So $4 million would be a revenue increase. The hybrid solution would be $4 million of expense reduction. I think that's what you said, Marissa, right? So,
I think I said
oh, so I'm sorry, 6 and 2.
Like
You were
Marissa
at
said, split
4 and
evenly,
4.
split the 2 million evenly. So I'm trying to clarify.
Okay.
Is that evenly according to current ratio, or are you literally, like you said, 1 million, 1 million?
Oh, I said in mine that it would unfortunately have to be on the schools to do more because I can't imagine that the town
Correct.
would be able
She
to cover
leans
that.
schools.
So I did say like more, unfortunately, for the schools to have to bear the brunt.
So I guess we'll always say split according to ratio. Unless someone
And we
specifically
can come
says
back and
otherwise.
define that for everybody's consumption at the next one. To be honest, we're really just trying to see if somebody here says it should be all expense and it should be all school. It should be all expense, it should be all town. It should be all revenue. If there's a hybrid in the middle, we'll have to come back and debate that as to what that really looks like
And
to get consensus on a vote.
what I'm also suggesting is what Chris is also suggesting is that the employees take something away, that they don't get the insurance, they go someplace else. I'm saying then that the same thing with the pay for the employees, that they can also give in as well. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
It's-
And you're
that
gonna
way
get
you
a-
would- That way you prevent layoffs.
Yep, you'll all get a model tonight,
Yeah.
right? So that you can literally change the inputs and you will drive how you think the town should budget. You're gonna have to make that call. I know it stinks and it's uncomfortable, but you have to. You have to, at the end of the day, say, I think new growth should be 5 million. We're all going to come back and probably try to argue with you why we don't think so and give you facts. You're all going to come back and say, I think that what you just said, what we're saying so far, is that largely the town reductions have to be $6 million of expense cut. So if 2.7, because in that model we just shared, they were already cutting 2 million. We were increasing it by 8 million of revenue. So if we only increase it by 4, then you got to find 6 million of expense reduction. So what we're so that everybody understands full transparency, we're articulating in that example a $6 million cut. Last time we cut 27 people for 21 for 2.7, 27 for 2.1.
All right, I don't have it in front of me.
One of those. So if 27 is 2.1 and you need to cut 6, we're signaling an 81 person reduction.
Just understand, I am a senior citizen. And so throwing these numbers out, just kind of jumping around it. So when it all gets down, you put it on paper, then I can see what you're talking about.
That's what we're going to do for everybody.
Yes.
That's what we're doing. So all I'm trying to is to give people a barometer. That last time we had this problem, we cut $2.1 million by shaving 27 people. I think I have it right. So if we have a $6 million problem, it's logical that you have a 81 person plus or minus 10, 15. It's not that. It's letting you know that I'm just giving active feedback that what you are saying translates into, if it's all a reduction on personnel, probably looking at 81 people. That's a $6 million problem. That could be okay. I'm just adding context.
Right.
That you're going to get the model, maybe not tonight, given the time, but you'll get the model and you can go through and play with it. And you might say, wow, I didn't realize that. Like, we have to appreciate by doing that model what you're asking. That's why I'm asking you to do it. Because if it's a $6 million reduction that's going to Connor and to Leisha to figure out, to their point, they know that what they're being directed at our recommendation, if we get there, is you got to think about roughly 80 people. So I'm just articulating the impact so that we all go into it eyes wide open. So no wrongs or right. This is all good. Jocelyn, where are you at?
I'm at, okay. I just don't think that we could find it in the expenses as much as we need to. I don't think we can find the difference. I was kind of thinking hybrid, but now I really just think we do need to find it in the revenue, and I liked some of Chris's ideas. Well, I liked all of her ideas. But, I think that, like the licensing, it's a good example. It kind of sounds small, but I think over time it would help. I definitely think new growth is an absolute need. And I think it's just in the override, and I might say 7 million and not 8.
Appreciate it. 7 million override. Do you want to go?
I was going to say 8 million override, everything that Chris listed, but I also feel very, very strongly about a fund for senior citizens and those with hardships that would allow donations for them to apply to. I believe we already have one.
I do, yeah. I just want to touch on that.
That is so important to me.
So, and I know this is uncomfortable for folks, and this is like the one thing I get to opt out of because I'm putting the budget together, so I'm in listening mode. But we do. We have a variety of programs. It doesn't mean we're doing enough and we can't do more. We always do need to do more. But when we went for Blanche Ames, we adopted the donation-driven senior and individuals with disabilities tax relief fund. Relying on donations is tough. We really, really leveraged ARPA funds. We put hundreds of thousands of dollars of those COVID recovery funds, which were also for economic impacts, into that we have put out the door. So we've done hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax relief to folks, and using that program, we're able to use much more reasonable standards, because as a lot of folks know, one of the things that's so hard for all of us, if you're in public policy in the United States, a lot of things are binary, right? Like the schools will talk about it with I think it's a poverty rate, and then if you're 4.9, you're in, and if you're 5, you're just entirely out. A lot of benefits and financial assistance for folks is the same way, right? You have $1,900 in your bank account, you could receive a certain benefit. You have $2,000, you get nothing. It's not a sliding scale. And so with that program, we upped. It wasn't based on like federal poverty line, which is like just so not even remotely commensurate with Massachusetts. It was based on 80% area median income, that's actually the standard in 40B housing. So that we were able to put a lot of funding out the door through that. We spent a lot of time in the fall in front of the county, getting payments so that we could do that for another, for this year in fiscal 25 and again in fiscal 26. We also then, when we went for the building project, passed a special act that now former Senator Timothy got through the state legislature that will create a local match, not necessarily dollar for dollar, but a local boost to the senior circuit breaker tax credit. So at the same time, part of the state's tax cut package that didn't get reported on a lot, which I was surprised because it's so impactful, is the senior circuit breaker tax credit. That's a state income tax credit that I believe is refundable. Doubled, I think, from $1,200 to $2,400 a year, something in that area.
24.
So that's meaningful. That's from the state, and we passed a special act that says coming this fiscal 26, this coming year, that's when we think meaningful amount of the debt for the building project will come online, be perceivable in your tax bill. We would have a 3-year program because this isn't in the state law. This is very innovative, and so it's a special law, and they usually aren't going to say, yeah, we'll just put that on the books forever. It's a 3-year program where we would have a match as well to those. To have like a local match. If you qualify already for the Department of Revenue, the State Department of Revenue senior tax credit, then we would do a local abatement for you as well.
Cool. I'm going to cut you off. That's
Sorry.
okay. No, it's appreciated. When and if we get to that side of the equation, I think we'll probably spend a tremendous amount of time understanding if we are going to impact people from a tax perspective, how we can assist them.
Thank you.
But if I could, that sounds
Thank you.
awesome.
Perfect.
I just want to get through the rest of this side so that we can at least walk away from this. It's nearly 10 o'clock. Jen?
So I'll be fast. I'd say $7.5 million minimum for an override. I could see going up to 8. And I agree with a lot of the points that Chris brought up and that Jocelyn and Nancy echoed. I think even if it's not going to be meaningful, but I think it's symbolic and still the right thing to do to right-size things like user fees so that we don't have taxpayers, even if it's only 50 cents out of their $800 increase that's going to offset a user fee. I think it's the right thing to do to have users bearing.
Sure. And we're going to spend a lot of time solutioning what we can do on the revenue side if we get there as a team. So that's awesome.
And one other piece, just that hasn't been brought up, is I think it's beneficial to, and I know you've done this, the analysis of overtime, right? The salaries and benefits of putting people in the positions to cover those hours versus
rather than doing
because I think it'll come up at 10.
It's a good point. We do that analysis each year. We actually just last year in the fire department shifted overtime and hired 4 firefighters instead to try to fill some of those gaps. But it's important, and yes, we do take a look at that because it's a moving target.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I believe it's about an $8 to an $8.5 million problem. I do believe there should be a hybrid approach that mostly leans on an override, but I do think there do need to be some strategic cuts that this passes. I don't think from the people I've talked to it seems like they are against government spending, but I do believe there are some programs that and positions that pass that I think go a long way towards increasing its chances. I do think, and I want to know the numbers more, but I do think it would be mostly going by the school side based on what we've seen so far. And I do want any override. If I'm mathematically, do I think we need an override? Yes. I would have a lot of potential contingencies and things I want to put in place with any sort of override.
What's your split between, like you said, it's 8.25, between 8 and 8.5. What would be the override versus what would be the expense reduction in your hybrid approach?
Again, rough $6 million override.
Difference in expense. Cool. Appreciate it. Connor will pass, Leisha will pass. So Wendy, do you have any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think the problem is actually north of 8 million, but in terms of an override amount, I think you're looking at it's got to be under 8. Even if you put in like 7.9 million.
So is the size of the problem 8 million? I agree optics, but
no, I do think it's more, but
Okay.
I think on a revenue basis, you got to keep it under 8 million. You're still going to have to make some adjustments to the budgets instead of just like leaving them as they are like right now. I think there needs to be some cuts there. I do think that you need to, make the amount bigger so that you have a surplus that you can leverage in subsequent years to get you through. I also think that one of the things that you could do is you could put aside some capital outlay for like either roads, buildings, school technology, police cruisers, and you could leverage that maybe in some of the earlier years, but maybe ramp that down to help offset that in the subsequent years to make the override last longer.
So, appreciate it, love it. Now I'm gonna say, so is the problem 10 million, but you want it to be a 7.9 revenue solve so that it's a $2.1 million expense reduction?
Yeah, I think it's closer to 10.
Okay, don't pick it because I gave it, but I just,
No,
Nancy's
shoot
gonna
the
say I didn't get a
messenger,
real
but,
number, so I'm gonna just head that off of the pass. You good?
Yeah.
All right, Denise, you're up next.
Oh, jeez.
I know, you're dying.
So I believe what's been presented that we've been running lean and mean. And so I think that this is not a reduction that we're looking at. I've always maintained that this is a mathematical equation. So I'm going to believe the statistics. I'm going to believe the budget that was prepared. I think that we don't have enough time in a 5-year plan to realize revenue. And I know the limitations in the town for new growth. I'm intricately aware of where the spots are and where they're not. We're just Easton is a composition unlike many other communities. I'd like to see our town and the schools be more progressive as opposed to reactive. I believe that the scenario that we put forth here is practical, but I believe that expenses, insurance, health, property, utilities, that I think that we're looking at them on the rise, and we're going to be looking at some of the percentage increases. I don't see them leveling off, at least in the finite future. I'm not sure what's happening in Massachusetts as a state economy in reaction to what's happening with the federal government. And so our state monies could be jeopardized. My recommendation is that we're looking at a 6.3? And I want to be reasonable that, I don't know how exact we are, but I don't want to leave in too much or too little. My recommendation is 7 million.
All override?
All override.
Okay, thank you. The reason why I have given Connor and Leisha a pass is they're building a budget that obviously is dictated by the amount of money that they have. The problem is 6.4 million. I'm happy if you folks want to share, but it's just at odds with what they're actually executing. So that's the only, I just didn't want you to think I was skipping you guys because of anything but that. We're happy to take your feedback. I just didn't want to put you on the spot. So that's why I skipped them, team. But just letting you know. Dottie?
I think it's 8 million plus, but I would stick to 8 because that seems to be the consensus, so I would be okay with that. I think that all of the things that Chris said I agree with. I had some of those also. I think that we're going to have some surplus property in the next couple of years as we decommission police and fire, that we should really proactively, I know that we're looking at that to see what will happen with that, bring in some funding that way as well. I think that
Those would be one-time funds. We could also, which is great, but we could also, to your point, make sure we don't limit the use, so it has a more likelihood of being used for something that might generate more new growth.
Right.
So just, I think it's a great idea.
I think that if we could have some employee contributions to OPEB to run some numbers and see what does $5 a week look like,
Sure.
$10 a week look like, it might be something that we could impact. Minimally, I don't know what those numbers look like though. We are talking to Brockton, the select board, actually to the Brockton City Council is going to be looking at having us connect to them, the sewer in the industrial park.
The industrial park, nice.
So that could be something that's activated.
Yep.
We don't know if that's gonna happen yet, but it's in, real life. So some things there. There's some properties that, need to be developed and, particularly in the downtown. We've been trying really hard to resume conversations about getting those built. We'll continue to do that. So there's a whole bunch of uncertainty, but there's a lot of opportunities there.
Sure.
I just don't see where the town is going to be able to cut. I am absolutely against cutting police and fire. For police, if somebody's out injured, if somebody has maternity or paternity leave, we've had people go out for military service. You lose 5 people at once for a strong period of time, and that drives up the overtime costs, and it also requires mandatory overtime, which I don't love, because that really burns people out. So that's a huge, huge concern to me. Not to mention the safety, so.
Gotcha. Are you all override? Are you for a hybrid override?
I'm leaning more towards override. I think we can tweak the expense side a little bit, but absolutely.
How much is the tweak worth? Nancy's gonna hold you accountable. She's the muscle. So if it's $8 million problem.
I would say 6 and 2.
6 and 2.
6 override.
Sure. Okay.
I think it's, just real quick, going to be hard to sell an override while you're doing cuts. Like as far as like a hybrid thing, like if as a taxpayer, if I'm going to be paying more in taxes, but you're going to be cutting things.
No, I'm with you.
I don't think that those are great optics.
It's not.
Which is.
None of this is good.
No, I understand that, but.
No, I'm with you.
You get like a 1 in.
Schedule, this is, I'm so 100% with you.
I just think there's a tipping point where, I know in my taxes, my tax bill just went up huge this year. Shockingly huge, because my house was in that next cycle of huge. So thinking about another 800, another 700 for the units, another 1,500 a year.
So for the next meeting, what Nancy and I will do is we'll take all of your responses. We'll put down what that translates into just for averages, high, low, like we did before with getting to the 5.7. And then we'll also put down and make it real for what happens to everybody's tax bill on average, so that we now know this is what we recommended. This is, that will result in an average of revenue increase. That's where all the responses have netted. So everybody here, I believe, said some form of revenue increase. So we will know what that average looks like and what that range looks like. That will then also formulate what the expense reduction looks like, so that when we come back for the next meeting, we'll have to have a discussion about the expense reduction. Just to your point, narrow in on, well, we said ratably, we said evenly. We're not going to get into, like, again, the specific department or people, but we can say, like, we heard good feedback. I think it leans towards school, or I think it leans towards this, or whatever. So let us do some homework to assimilate all the responses, so we can come back to you next week to really dial in on a final recommendation that we'll take a roll call vote on, to say we are recommending that there is a revenue increase of X. And candidly, that's, I'll be honest, that's almost all that matters. We'll do the expense impact, but the expense impact is going to be dollars that we'll do some quick math in terms of relative headcount at average salaries. But that's going to, any expense reductions, as Connor and Alicia are going to go back, and they're already doing that. They're already making a plan to cut 6.4 million. So they're on that. That's their job to do. We can give them guidance of it should be all town, it should be all basketball, it should be all school, like not basketball, all school. That would probably just help them understand in their dialogue, because they're going to now have to go back and continue to understand what that looks like. Their exercise is defined. They're, as you heard, they're doing a $6.4 million problem solution. Back to the issue that we discussed, which is important, I would just ask this committee to let us take that offline. And when I say us, that would probably be a discussion between the select board, the school committee, town administrator, and school superintendent about timing. Only a select board can ask for an override vote. So that's in their purview, and their board is not here. So Nancy and I will probably go back to try to understand and push boundaries of, do we even feel like it's possible for us to go to the select board and beg them to try to do this and put something on the vote in 30 days, and so that we can come back to you with a plan as to what that would look like from an engagement. I'm pretty mathematical. I know how many doors would need to be knocked on. I know how many people you need to communicate to. I know how many votes you'd probably largely need to get to pass that. And we have to just look at ourselves to say, do we think we could do that by end of March, making that up, so that we have 2 weeks to allow the team to prepare for an April 15th deadline to begin notifications. I don't know if that's possible. I just don't want us to walk away from tonight thinking that anything is impossible, because we still have some time and miracles have been worked before in different ways.
So I have our next meeting in 2 weeks on the 12th.
Yep.
With everyone, and then the 2 weeks after that will be our open house.
I'm going to propose that we not talk about the next 2 agenda items. We know the meeting cadence, but about 226. And the reason why is not that we won't talk about it, but I would ask if it's okay if we dialogue via email and we get your thoughts as to what we think we should do then. I'd like to spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about it now, but it is 10:12. I'd like to have a hard stop at 10:30, unless everybody here wants to tell me, no, I'm dying to go more. I'm okay with that. I can go, but I just want to be thoughtful. So why don't we spend 5 or 10 minutes on February 26th?
So selfishly, the thing that I'm most interested in, because it has to go to a printer tomorrow, is what are we putting on that invite? We, I think, checked with the schools. We could do Blanche James that evening. We could do RO. Sorry, I sent it to you today.
So the thought was,
it's gonna be 11
we were thinking of a recommendation of using Blanche James because it represents an opportunity for a lot of townspeople to come and see exactly where their investment has been spent, the competitive advantage that a school of that quality represents, and so that we're not hiding either. We will absolutely engage with our residents so that they understand we know we've asked them to pay more for debt exclusion overrides as well. There will be a complete schedule as to what the average taxpayer will be paying for the next 5 to potentially 10 years, and we're going to be fully transparent. It's just right by them. So we're trying to do our best. I would vote for Blanche James. I know that's largely where we netted. Dr. Cabral, if that still works for you and the plan still works. We're also contemplating potentially opening up access earlier so that the school team could give tours if people wanted to do that. Just to, again, show, I went on a tour and learned so much and saw so much and was so impressed. Giving that opportunity again, I think could be compelling. I would just, to me, the schools can push back. Like if that gets tricky, that gets an issue, then, but that would just be a nice way to show off the school.
Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, depending on how the chairs get set up, we could probably fit 200 in the cafetorium-ish.
We can fit that many, but the school department doesn't have that many chairs.
I mean, Public Works and I could figure that out, but
Okay.
but yeah, as long as we could, a couple hundred, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, we had a good turnout at Queesit, and this. So just for the committee's benefit, we asked the select board Monday. The select board transferred $6,500 as a budget for mailings from available Stonehill donations, because obviously sending that using tax dollars, when we're saying we don't have tax dollars to spend, people would have a lot of fun with. But we want to get that out.
We're going to
this
send a
week.
mailing to every resident in every household in the community that this is what we're looking at.
And we want to hear, I mean, I think the general gist is the committee is not all the way done yet, but it said these are the 2 options.
Yep.
And they have to finalize recommendations by March. We want to hear from you first. So
Correct.
come to this open house. Here's the QR code. Kathy, if you could work a miracle and do some of the stuff. I mean, it's mostly.
It looks great.
So it's what we use for other mailers. It's just like I would need like that update of the nice
The
puzzle
image.
piece one with, if we agree, Blanche James. Is it 6? I like going to concerts, so I'm really big on actually telling people doors and when it actually starts, because a lot of people will just be kind of flowing through. And one of the, I wouldn't say complaint, but one of the pieces of feedback we got about Queesit House was, oh, it said 6. I came here at 6. Why do I have to wait till 6:30 for a presentation?
Sure.
So maybe saying doors, come in, get your seats, presentation at 6:30. I don't know.
And we can talk format. Maybe we have some stations somewhere in the hallways. Maybe, Denise?
I'd like to propose or throw something out, that some of the parents aren't able to come because of childcare. Can we invite parents to bring their children along? Is this something that doesn't work? Because there's a population that we could use at the school, and it's Blanche Ames. I don't have a solution. It's just a thought, because repeatedly I'm hearing that parents would like to be part of this, but they just, they're, maybe a parent-teacher organization might sponsor a corner, or.
Normally it's private. If I remember, the Hans used to help coordinate that at town meetings, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was volunteer students. You
Yep.
do that at town meeting. They're graduated.
Right.
It's still possible though, because there are a lot of groups and organizations, like we have the child development program at the high school that could very easily, if we reach out and
Sure.
kids need community service hours, like that's an easy fix. We can get like childcare, if that's a possibility.
Why don't we see if we can make that work appropriately and
Yeah, we have a
without
few weeks to figure
consequence.
that out.
I would also hope that by getting the message out sooner rather than later, people can either coordinate getting a sitter as if they were.
It's a parent
I'm with
issue.
you.
Yeah.
I'm pushing back though to say
That's
if
the
people
best laid plans.
can get a sitter for dinner, maybe they can get a sitter for this. Maybe one of the parents can come. And look, I've been in that boat where I didn't go for many years because our kids were young and Jenny and I couldn't make it. So I understand the point, but maybe we can just, where I'm going with it is, let's message our constituents now, or put it on Facebook now, tell your friends now, and with 26 days of planning, maybe we can get better attendance, and we'll work towards getting some childcare to hold that out. For context, at the town meetings, unless I misremember, but when we were dropping our kids off, it was like 20 to 25 kids. Do you remember it differently? Anybody, did they drop their kids off?
No, but if there is an invitation going out, if there is childcare, it would be really important to have it on there and for them to let us know if they're bringing children, or a time to bring them a little earlier, because they do have to complete waivers,
I think
waiver forms.
because of that kind of thing, the consideration there, and on just the amount of runway mailers need. Because another thing we don't want is these hitting people's mailbox like 2 days before or the day
we need to
before.
get 'em out.
Is let's set the date, the time. If something like that can happen, then we would have to do a sign-up form or something. But we can't promise it with a mailer that's going out this week.
Yeah.
Like, if you're gonna do, is this where you might do 2 presentations?
We don't know.
Okay, so just hypothetically, if you were going to do 2 presentations, maybe we could say that, if a parent comes with a child, which a child is welcome in the school, that, you attend one session and you bring your friend to allow you to go to the other session, or something like that.
Heard.
I don't know, I'm thinking out
That's
loud.
fair. That's good. Appreciate
Were we
it.
thinking it's gonna start at 6 PM, the same timing?
I think 6 to 8 seemed to work. We got a good engagement.
Tom, can you be there at 6?
I want to, yes, for that.
Or do we want to make
No.
it 6:30 start, doors at 6?
6. That'll be okay. I appreciate that. What Connor's alluding to
So-
is just a new work implication for me.
Okay.
It's personal, but for one day I can solve it. Appreciate that though.
So should I say from 6 to 8 PM?
Sure.
Okay.
Is it still called an open house on that?
On the flyer?
Yeah.
I think
It
so.
was, so, right now, it's just set as like join the conversation. It doesn't say open house, it doesn't say presentation. It just says come, like, learn what is PACE, learn about the budget.
Is this a
Conversation.
poster
Yeah, it's-
part
it's-
of it as well, or are we doing that part of it also, or?
You
it's
mean like
just the pres-
stations like we did before? I think that will be developed as to what
Okay.
we think will flow best at Blanche
Yeah,
James.
Tom, if I may, I think so. One of the things I flagged I sent a draft to Tom and Nancy, and I didn't want to be presumptuous wherever committee is going. I think Chris or Jim, you've referenced like people are going to see some of these suggestions and have a pretty visceral response. You had suggested, and based on what all of you said tonight, what I put was very generic and bureaucratic. We now know PACE is considering either an override or large cuts to schools, public safety, public works. And we want to hear how you
Yeah, I
feel
think
about
you
that.
should say it.
Can't we say that everybody at PACE is considering an override? So PACE, we all said some form of revenue.
Reality.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think-
I heard that tonight.
Yes. PACE
To be
is,
clear, okay.
yeah, that's what I heard.
No, but so what we're
No,
saying
I'm
is
saying
you
that's,
put
I
that-
only heard that tonight, that it was like a majority, whatever you're saying.
Correct. Yeah, we
Okay.
have been navigating to get to this point.
Yep.
And we needed everybody to finally absorb all the info
Mm-hmm.
and literally put out there what they think the solution is.
Is the mailer, is it dramatic enough, I guess?
Well,
So
I think we need
the-
to say PACE is going to be recommending a degree of override or override, along with material cuts that will impact programs and services.
Because it's like,
But I think you need to be more specific in programs. You need to say schools, public works, public safety, right?
I'm good with that.
But so I don't know. So my general, and my experience is not always correct, but generally if something gets a mailer says override, like they're gonna.
Yeah, like it shouldn't be buried in a paragraph.
No,
Oh, no,
no.
we want-
So I'm sorry, I don't have it on screen, but
So
it's
it says right now, it says promoting a sustainable Easton. It gives what is PACE with the background information, which is what we've seen all along. Promoting a sustainable Easton invites you to learn about Easton's budget. Years of high inflation, increasing costs of healthcare, insurances, and other expenses will force Easton to consider difficult budget choices this May, which could result in cuts to education, public safety, and other public services. Join the conversation on February 26th. PACE is tasked with making recommendations on the budget to Easton voters this May. They want to hear from you first.
I would argue there should be a tagline at the top in some different font and color that says PACE
Switch
is
quick
recommending
to
an
will.
override, as well as material cuts to staffing, including teachers, police, and fire. And that should be bolded at the top
And
so
it
that,
says, it said could, but like, I mean.
no, not
it
could.
shouldn't be
PACE
could, it
is
should be-
recommending an override that will increase tax bills, as well as, like, this is now Chris's show, back to 5 months ago. We want people to get it and to say, wow, and that they talk to their neighbor.
This is
and say,
happening.
Yeah, like,
Right.
this is real. You gotta go.
to this thing.
I don't know if you want feedback, but you could send it to us so we could look at it and have a quick response
So-
by tomorrow morning.
yeah.
It
if it's
just
by
can't
tomorrow,
be debated. So
Yeah, you
we can
can't reply all.
BCC it,
Yeah.
and you can provide feedback, which is awesome. I would argue, if it's okay, Kathy, could you send it to Nancy and I, and we'll take a quick stab? And just, because I don't think I've seen it, I'm sorry, it probably is in my inbox.
It's in your inbox, but that's
It's-
I just
yeah,
feel like
it's-
it's so
it-
important.
All right, I'm
It's
sorry.
our one invitation.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree,
should
and I'm not
align
trying
on
to
it.
time
Yeah.
pressure folks, but again, so if we'll, because I have all my comments in there for Kathy, and I'm very self-conscious about those things, so I'll send a
Yeah.
clean one out that can go to you folks, and you can't reply all, because then it's deliberating, you have feedback.
BCC, please.
Just
Yeah.
BCC, then no one can do that.
Okay, fine. So we can do that. I guess I'll do it tonight.
And because Jocelyn,
And if you
I'm
have-
sure
if
we'll
you
have
have-
some great suggestions
Yeah,
too.
for
Agreed.
sure. If you have feedback,
Thank
just
you.
shoot an email to me, because my staff's going to be the one that orders it.
Okay.
And the one thing I feel strongly about, unless someone doesn't differs, is the business card we did. I thought looked nice aesthetically. I know that Kathy did that with Canva. We're going to have to take a Canva and just JPEG it and stick it in there.
Yeah, I already updated the Canva one, so I
Cool.
can send you that. JPEG. I'll just send
Alright.
that directly to you.
Sure, and that's I
Because
mean
I
we're
don't
saying
have
at
Word
Blanche
doc.
we're saying at Blanche Ames 6 o'clock,
Yep.
6 to 8,
6 to 8.
and we're gonna work all the details out of the next
Yeah,
2 weeks, and
yeah.
it's gonna be great.
That's fine.
Not trying to cut engagement at all, I agree. So
I
that's well said.
Yeah,
But we
so-
we want you to all look at it. We just need to ask you to turn it around tomorrow morning.
That's
I'll do
fine.
it now because I'm gonna fall asleep walking back to my office.
Right. The other thing I would just ask, does anybody know how to get in touch with the people who rented the billboard outside of Honeydew and 123?
Yes.
It's currently the Tricentennial.
Yes,
How much does that cost?
a 5-digit number. All
A
donor.
5-digit number?
It's for a year, and it's all donated money. So it's not. The town is not paying for it. Just want to really emphasize that.
5-digit
I think so.
number?
You know what?
For Route 123 in Easton?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, advertising for 365 days on a billboard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So it's all 365
Yeah, it's a
days?
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
Oh
you
yeah,
get-
that's
We
that's
can't get on it.
If you get a tricentennial banner, it's cheaper.
Can't get on it.
also paid with donations.
Well, there's other billboards.
So just to be clear, billboards. I'm not an expert, but expensive. Ramp up time, I don't think is there. And again, Tricentennial has a rather impressive donation budget to work with. We do not. So I don't mean to be a rain cloud there.
No, look, I'll explore it separately.
Sure.
So it's not that expensive for 1 week of exposure. It's usually a lot of those, especially statics, that might be empty for a while. But I'm just trying to find a way that we can let a lot of people know with a very giant visual, so that people, because we're going to hear it, and I understand it. We're so busy, but people are going to be like, I didn't even know this was going on.
What about our electronic?
Electronic signs. Oh,
So we could do the blinky boards. We'll do the mailing. We'll spam it out online. We'll put it like we'll do the kind of works, so to speak.
We have those corner sites as well. CVS and up by, you put up the sign says election, stuff like that. So you have those spots where you can put up the sign. At least there's
Need
two.
plow
Cover
drivers.
the sign.
So again, I'm just trying.
Yeah.
I like to say yes,
No, I get it.
but this is like 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out.
get
So we will do our best. The number one thing to get this into most people's hands is putting it in everyone's mailbox.
Yeah.
And so my part right now is going to be, I'm going to send that Word doc to everyone to just take a look at, give feedback, shoot it right back to me as far as I think this, and this. I'll work with Tom and Nancy and we'll amalgamate something. And unless anyone here objects, I think I need to know that you all, after you send your feedback to me and Tom and Nancy, you're good with whatever we have to decide just to get it out.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be, again, regrettable. I wish we had more time, but if we don't send it to the printer and then this thing shows up, I mean, imagine
we're good.
what a black eye.
Focus on
would
that.
be.
Some of us will break off and think about other ways to create visual engagement in the community. Chris can get us a fire truck and we can just walk around with some 5x7 foot signs.
No, we cannot.
No?
So that's another thing is that the town staff in particular.
I'm sorry, I was being facetious.
I know, sorry. Well,
Yeah.
I just.
But that's a good call. You should
I'm very
clarify. I'll just be
sensitive
quiet now.
on
It's a long
TV.
night.
It's-
What was that? Yeah, it's 10:30. Thank you all. Long meeting emotionally and physically, and just appreciate your effort.
Can I just ask, what is our time for the next meeting? Is it
It's in 2
5:30,
weeks.
6:30?
Oh, 5:30.
6:30.
6:30, okay.
Yep.
6:30 start in 2 weeks.
Make a motion to adjourn?
I would love one.
Second.
Done. Fulgenetti
Too fast.
I
and
gotta go back to
Mills.
work.
Everybody in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. Thank you all.